Hello! In this video, we'll be exploring the Marvel theory that literally no one talks about. If you come to enjoy this video, please remember to leave a like and subscribe. In the heart of a world where secrets run as deep as the hidden histories of its heroes, there lies a theory whispered in the corridors of Marvel fandom. A tale where the fate of a beloved family hangs in the balance of a dark past. Long before Peter Parker donned his iconic mask and discovered that great power comes with great responsibility, there existed a narrative that painted his family in shades of mystery, barely touched upon in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The MCU, with its intricate tapestry of heroes and villains, left the details of Richard and Mary Parker largely to the imagination. Their story was a puzzle with missing pieces, sparking conversations among fans who began to wonder, what if there was more to their lives than the background we were shown? And what if their fates were intertwined with one of the most tragic figures in Marvel's lore, the Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes? The story begins in an era shrouded in war and secrecy. Imagine a world torn apart by conflict, where loyalties were tested and the lines between right and wrong blurred under the weight of impossible decisions. It was a time when lives were lost, not simply in the battlefields of combat, but in the clandestine operations that remained hidden from the public eye. In this turbulent setting, Richard and Mary Parker moved with purpose and determination. They were not merely bystanders in the grand narrative of espionage and heroism, but active participants, agents, whose assignments took them across continents, chasing threads of information that could change the balance of power. Though their appearances in the cinematic universe were fleeting and enigmatic, old manuscript, scribbled letters, and the lore passed down by comic storytellers hinted at a more complex history. Their involvement in covert operations had not only been dangerous but had woven them tightly into the fabric of an international intrigue that stretched far beyond what ordinary people could imagine. It was during these dangerous missions that they encountered figures who would later redefine the concept of heroism and villainy alike. Among these figures emerged a man once known as James Buchanan Barnes, a soldier whose fate was forever altered by the dark machinations of a secret organization. Bucky Barnes, known later as the Winter Soldier, had been transformed from a brave warrior into an instrument of ruthless lethality, a man with a past that he could neither fully remember nor escape. His early years were marked by unwavering loyalty and a sense of camaraderie that bound him to those fighting alongside him. However, fate took a cruel turn, leading him into the clutches of a sinister organization called Hydra. Hydra, with its insidious goals and covert operations, played a pivotal role in shaping many destinies during that era. It was here that Bucky's life took a dark detour. Fractured and broken down in more ways than one, he was forced into a program designed to harness his skills and subvert his very identity. With memories suppressed and his will manipulated, Bucky transformed into the Winter Soldier, an assassin whose missions were as cold and calculated as the winter that defined his new name. In this state, he became a ghost, an enigma operating in the shadows, carrying out orders with ruthless efficiency. His past successes made him a favorite asset for Hydra, and his actions on secret missions would have far-reaching consequences, rippling out into a future that none could foresee. One particularly murky mission stands out, a mission that would, if unraveled, suggest a disturbing connection to the fate of the Parker family. In the covert realm of covert operations and morally ambiguous deals, the threads of destiny can intersect in surprising ways. Imagine a situation where the hands of fate unwittingly brush against the lives of those who remain unaware of the machinations behind their destiny. According to the theory that has captivated the hearts and minds of many speculators, it was during one of these covert missions that the Winter Soldier, under orders he could scarcely comprehend, found himself face to face with a critical juncture involving none other than Richard Parker. The details of this encounter have been shrouded in a veil of uncertainty, pieced together from fragmented reports, decoded communications, and the recollections of those who had once worked behind the scenes. The narrative, as pieced together, paints a picture of a covert assignment that seemed simple on the surface, a typical target, a routine elimination. However, as Bucky Barnes approached his mission, the environment was one charged with the tensions of war and the quiet paranoia of double agent. His heart, though numbed by years of controlled conditioning and manipulated memories, still retained echoes of the man he once was. In the midst of the chaos, a crucial encounter took place. By the light of a fading winter sun, in an abandoned safe house that whispered secrets of expired missions, Bucky crossed paths with the man who would later be known as Richard Parker. The meeting was brief, just a few seconds of recognition. a flicker of something deeper before the mission's directive overtook every shred of humanity. The events of that encounter remain as murky as a half-remembered nightmare. But what is clear is that a decision was made, one that inevitably led to irreversible consequences. In the days that followed, rumors began to surface in the underground circles of operatives and intelligence communities. Whispers suggested that a high-value target had been eliminated during that covert operation, a name that resonated beyond the immediate circle of operatives and caught the ear of those who later pieced together the scattered histories of the Marvel Universe. Was it an unfortunate casualty of war, or was it a necessary sacrifice for the greater good? The answers were never officially recorded, disappearing into the classified annals of secret missions and suppressed memory. Bucky himself, forever tormented by flashes of repressed recollections, was left with a haunting sense of uncertainty. Though his directives were clear, the moral cost of his actions began to weigh on him, a burden that would follow him through the rest of his tumultuous existence. For years to come, as Bucky fought battles that tested not only his physical limits, but also the depths of his conscience, his past actions would become a source of constant torment. The repressed memories of that fateful mission surfaced in fragments, interwoven with the guilt and burden of being an instrument of an organization that had erased his true self. In quiet moments, amid the echoes of memories partially recovered, he would catch a glimpse of a family, the Parkers, whose fate he could neither confirm nor deny. For Bucky, the line between duty and personal morality blurred, leaving him with the lingering, unanswerable question: was he responsible for a tragedy that echoed through the corridors of one of Marvel's most beloved legacies? The implications stretched far beyond the immediate tragedy of a single family. In the rich lore of the Marvel Universe, the lives of ordinary citizens often become collateral in the grand scheme of international covert operations and epic battles. Richard and Mary Parker, from the faint mentions in early texts to the scarce allusions in modern cinematic universes, were more than just background characters. They were real people whose lives had been touched by forces far greater than themselves. Their mysterious disappearance, long assumed to be a casualty of espionage and dangerous liaisons, would gain a darker and more intricate meaning if the theory held true. Their untimely deaths would not merely be the result of random or unavoidable circumstances, but rather a calculated move in a larger, more sinister game. A sacrifice made in the interest of secret missions and hidden agendas. As the years passed and the world of espionage continued its relentless march forward, hints of this tragic incident began to emerge in subtle ways. In private briefings among seasoned operatives and coded communications intercepted by those with access to the classified files of Adria, were references to the mission in Prague or sometimes Project Winter's End encrypted identifiers that, when decoded, mapped onto the timeline of the covert operation that had allegedly sealed the Parker family's fate. These references would vanish as quickly as they appeared, leaving behind only the tantalizing possibility that everything had been planned down to the very last detail. It smelled of meticulous orchestration, as though the fate of a family had been weighed in the balance like a pawn in an unending game of chess. In the clandestine realms of international intelligence, such sacrifices were not viewed lightly. Each life taken in the name of national security or covert advantages was a decision that rippled out, affecting generations and forever altering the lives of those left behind. For Bucky, tormented by the roles he had been compelled to play, the path of redemption seemed as elusive as the elusive truth of his own identity. Each mission, each silent night filled with the echoes of lost memory, added to the mosaic of regret that he carried with him. His journey was a desperate search for absolution, a quest to piece together the fragments of a past marred by violence and unforeseen loss. Haunted by the possibility that he had extinguished a light that should never have been snuffed out, Bucky began to seek answers. In moments of rare introspection, he would confide in trusted allies and murmur to himself about the burdens of fate, the weight of orders, and the heavy cost of a life lived under the control of a regime that had stripped him of free will. Even as he fought valiantly for redemption in the battles that defined his later years, there remained a deep, unhealed scar, a reminder of a night when the winter cold touched more than just the skin. The theory that linked Bucky Barnes to the untimely demise of Richard Parker has grown over time, evolving with each generation of Marvel enthusiasts who dissect every scrap of lore, every ambiguous reference in the comics, and every understated moment in the films. To many, it presents a narrative that is both chilling and tragically beautiful, a story of fate, manipulation, and the indiscriminate nature of war. It is a portent that suggests that in the darkest recesses of that frozen soul, There lies the memory of a man who might have been forced to commit an act so terrible that it reverberates through time. The very notion that the man known as the Winter Soldier could have been the unwitting executioner of the Parker family's legacy provides a poignant commentary on the complexities of free will versus duty. We begin to see more than just a simple cause and effect scenario. Instead, we see a tapestry woven with intricate details that blur the lines between responsibility and control. The timeline, though fragmented in official records, hints at connections that are too compelling to ignore. In a series of covert operations led by Tadra, where orders were absolute and individual conscience was suppressed beneath the weight of a grander design, each mission was meticulously planned to ensure that collateral damage was minimized, or so the operatives were told. Yet behind the veneer of precision lay the possibility of tragic mistakes, orchestrated by forces who deemed individual lives secondary to the larger narrative of global strategy. Could it be that in one of the many assignments that kept Bucky Barnes in the service of a dark empire, he was simply fulfilling orders that led him to cross paths with destiny in a way that forever altered the course of Peter Parker's life? Imagine the tension of those final moments in a dimly lit safe house, where the air was thick with the scent of cold metal and the distant hum of danger. Bucky, his mind a battleground of repressed memories and conflicting emotions, approached the final door with the precision of an assassin, but the hesitance of a man who remembered fragments of a better past. In that moment, every second stretched out like an eternity, as he hesitated, hardwired to obey but slowly awakening to the nagging doubts that tugged at his conscience. His gloved hand hovered uncertainly, the weight of the mission pressing down on him like the chill of an endless winter. On the other side of that door was a family whose legacy was bound to the future of heroism, a family that had sacrificed everything in the pursuit of a cause that was larger than themselves. And in that split second, a moment lost to time, the decision was made. A decision that would echo in every subsequent metahuman encounter and every whispered theory in underground dossiers. In the wake of that fateful encounter, the fallout was both immediate and far-reaching. The shock of a single life extinguished carried with it ripples that would eventually reach the corridors of power and the hearts of future generations. Richard Parker was mourned not just by those who believed in the cause he had dedicated himself to, but by a world that was yet to understand the true extent of the sacrifice that had been made. Mary Parker, the quiet strength behind the scenes, was left to piece together the fragments of a life shattered by loss. And in the silence that followed, the question remained: had there been a darker hand at play behind this mysterious tragedy? As international intelligence agencies scrambled to cover up their tracks and rewrite the narrative of a mission gone awry, those who knew the truth found themselves facing a moral dilemma. For the agents of Hydra and their covert operatives, the mission was but a cog in a vast machinery of secret operations, a necessary action taken to safeguard national interests. But for those who dared to question, the tragedy raised fundamental issues about free will and accountability. How could an individual, manipulated through years of brainwashing and coercion, be held responsible for a decision that was never entirely his own? And more importantly, how would the lives of those indirectly touched by that decision continue, forever haunted by the ghost of a man they never knew was once capable of such profound loss? Time marched on, and the echoes of that clandestine evening began to merge with the larger narrative of a world where heroes and villains alike struggled with the weight of their past actions. Bucky's journey was a constant reminder that no matter how far one might run from their demons, they are never truly free from the consequences of the choices forced upon them. In quiet corners of the globe, where old operatives met under the cover of darkness, the story was retold in hushed voices, a story that blurred the boundaries between myth and history, between the sanctioned duties of espionage and the irreparable cost of innocence lost. The Parker family's story, a story that had mostly been relegated to footnotes in the chronicles of secret wars and heroic sagas, suddenly took on new life as the threads of fate began to converge. People long intrigued by the elusive details of Peter Parker's lineage began to revisit old files, scattered diary entries from agents long retired, and confidential communications that hinted at unanswered questions. The narrative that suggested the involvement of the Winter Soldier in the fateful night of the Parker disappearance resonated because it was not a tale of clear-cut villains and heroes, but rather one of shades of gray, a narrative where the complexities of duty, manipulation, personal guilt intertwine in an irreversible embrace. In the quiet moments after battles had raged and the dust of conflict had finally settled, Peter, unaware of the full truth behind his parents' fate, often found himself wrestling with a sense of abandonment, a loss that was never fully explained. It was a legacy of mystery, where unanswered questions lingered like echoes in an empty room, each one a reminder of a part of his past that had been violently ripped away. The theory that his father's final moments were dictated by the cold, unyielding hand of the Winter Soldier added a layer of tragic irony to his story, a poignant twist where the savior of many could also be connected to profound law. This narrative, woven together from mere fragments and half-remembered accounts, became a persistent undercurrent of Peter's life, influencing his choices, his outlook, and ultimately the great power that he would one day somberly wield. As the threads of history continued to be unraveled by those who dared to question the official accounts, investigators and dedicated fans alike delved deeper into the labyrinth of hidden files and classified briefings. Every detail, no matter how minute, from the angle of a bullet to the precise timing of communications, was scrutinized in an effort to piece together the true sequence of events. Conversations in dimly lit backrooms, over cups of bitter coffee and broken dreams, took on the nature of modern folklore. The theory of the Winter Soldier's involvement spread like wildfire, passed down from one conspiratorial circle to another, each retelling adding layers of nuance and emotional depth. In these gatherings of minds fueled by a longing for truth, the narrative transformed into a living, breathing legend, a reminder that even in a universe filled with extraordinary powers, the most powerful stories were often those of human frailty and tragic mistake. There were moments of revelation, albeit fleeting, that added tantalizing clues to the tapestry of events. A misplaced document here, a fragment of a coded message there, served as breadcrumbs leading to a conspiracy that stretched back decades. The chilling possibility that Hydra had planned the mission with a calculated precision to eliminate not only a potential threat, but also a nurturer of what was to become one of Marvel's most iconic legacies, ignited debates among even the most hardened skeptics. Each piece of evidence unearthed was akin to a note in a long-forgotten ballad of sorrow and regret, a hymn to the countless lives that would forever be entangled in the complexities of espionage and clandestine warfare. For Bucky, the journey of self-discovery and reckoning was a slow and arduous one. In the quiet solitude of his personal reflections, away from the clamor of modern battles and the flashing recaps of media interviews, he began to understand that redemption was not found in an act of heroism alone, but in the acknowledgement of one's sins and the courage to seek forgiveness. The faces of those he had indirectly wronged, the silent screams of remorse that haunted his dreams, all merged into an overwhelming need to confront the past. With every step he took away from the shadow of the Winter Soldier, he fought to reclaim not just his lost identity, but also the possibility of absolving himself from the burden of decisions made under duress. Yet the memories, fractured and elusive as they were, kept returning in waves, each flash of recollection carrying with it the weight of an irreversible act that had sealed the fate of the Parker family. The narrative of that fateful night, rich with the elements of tragedy and unintended consequences, is not one of clear heroes or villains. It is a story where the lines of morality are blurred by the exigencies of survival and the ruthless dictates of a hidden war. The theory of the Winter Soldier's involvement is steeped in the complexities of a time when the thirst for control overshadowed the sanctity of individual decisions. Beneath the veneer of a single covert mission lay deeper truths about how lives are sometimes sacrificed for causes unseen, how the machinery of secret organizations can turn the human spirit into a tool for unspeakable deeds. And in this dark convergence of fate and duty, the Parker family's destiny was irrevocably altered, a poignant reminder that in a world dominated by choices made in the shadows, tragedies may originate from places where no light dares to break through. As the saga unfolds across decades, interwoven with the rise and fall of empires, the whispers of that night continue to reverberate. In hushed tones and during late-night conversations among those who have stared too long into the abyss of classified history, the legacy of the Parker family is often spoken of as a casualty of war, a war that fought not only on the battlefield but in the hidden pages of intelligence reports and covert orders. And so it is that the story endures, not merely as a relic of a past long buried by official diktats, but as a living testament to the complexities of duty, the cruelty of manipulation, and the unforgiving nature of the choices enforced upon those caught in the crossfire. Even as Peter Parker grew up in the bright glare of the modern age, championing truth, justice, and the responsibility that comes with great power, the shadow of his parents' fate loomed over him like a ghost. It was not just the absence of parental guidance that shaped him, but the mystery behind their fate. A mystery that left him with a lingering sense of unfinished business. Every heroic act, every sacrifice he made, was fueled by an innate desire to right the wrongs of the past, and to reclaim the legacy that had been stolen from him in the darkest hours of human conflict. The theory that his father fell at the hands of the Winter Soldier would always be a bittersweet undercurrent in his life story, a reminder that sometimes in the grand tapestry of destiny, even heroes are born of tragedy. Consider the moments when Peter, despite his own prodigious strength and resilience, would find his thoughts drifting to the legacy of his parents. In quiet nights, when the city had finally succumbed to sleep and the weight of his responsibilities momentarily lifted, the echoes of a distant past would resurface. He would recall the scant details passed on by those who had known his parents, whispers of a life filled with danger, love, and sacrifice, hints of secret missions and unsolved mysteries that pointed to a connection with the hidden world of espionage. And in those memories, there appeared a subtle yet unmistakable presence, the shadow of a man who had once been controlled by Hydra, a man whose own internal battles might have inadvertently altered the course of history. The theory, growing in popularity among conspiracy theorists and dedicated historians alike, began to manifest in significant ways. In scholarly debates and fan conventions, panels were organized to discuss the intertwining of the Parker legacy with the enigmatic past of the Winter Soldier. Every testimony, every uncovered document, became a thread in the sprawling narrative that sought to explain one of the darkest mysteries of the Marvel Universe. Researchers poring over classified files from long-forgotten missions found that discrepancies in timelines and orders hinted at a deliberate manipulation of events. It is as though a ghost from the past had reappeared to haunt the present, challenging the official records that had too neatly arranged the threads of history. Every retelling of the event was filled with the rich drama of espionage, stories of late-night rendezvous in abandoned warehouses, coded messages sent over crackling radios, and desperate moments of hesitation in the face of orders that clawed at the soul. One such tale, often recounted with a tremor of both regret and defiance, described how Bucky Barnes, standing at the crossroads of loyalty and conscience, found himself unexpectedly pausing at a critical juncture. The dim light of a single lamp illuminated the stark reality: a man torn between the directives instilled by an unyielding regime and the buried echoes of a humanity that had long been suppressed. His gloved hands, usually so steady in the execution of his deadly tasks, betrayed a moment of undeniable uncertainty, and while the official record would later describe the incident as a simple act of elimination, the undercurrents of conflicting emotions hinted at a deeper tragedy, a tragedy that, if fully understood, might have rewritten the destiny of a family whose future was decimated in that solitary, fateful moment. As the theory spread, so did the impact it had on the collective consciousness of Marvel devotees. The narrative that wove together covert operations, the trauma of repressed memories, and the irreversible act of a mind manipulated by external forces became a powerful allegory for the loss of innocence in the price of a secretive path. The story, with its intricate details and unresolved moral dilemmas, served as a stark reminder that in the grand chessboard of international espionage, every move, every seemingly insignificant decision, carries with it consequences that extend far beyond the immediate. The legacy of the Parker family, once thought to be merely an untold backstory, was elevated to a profound lesson about the fragility of life and the often unintended sacrifices made in the name of order and security. In the quiet spaces between the relentless actions of superheroes, this theory provided a breath of introspection, a narrative that demanded both empathy and scrutiny. It compelled audiences to think about the cost of serving an empire of covert agencies, the erasure of personal identity under the guise of duty, and the tragic collateral damage inflicted upon families who never signed up for the mission of being heroes. For those who listened, every line of dialogue, every carefully constructed scene in subsequent media, resonated with the unspoken question: could it be that the fate of one's family is not always the result of fate, but sometimes the remnant of endless battles fought in the shadows, battles that no official report dares to acknowledge? Thus, the legend of that tragic night continued to evolve. With each retelling, the details grew richer, the implications more profound, and the emotional weight heavier. Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, remained a complex character, a man whose heroic efforts in later years to reclaim his soul were constantly haunted by the specter of a single, irreversible decision. And the Parker family, forever etched into the annals of a world where secrets kill just as surely as bullets, became a symbol of everything lost when duty overshadows humanity. In time, as more voices joined the chorus questioning the official narrative, it became clear that the story was not merely about identifying a single moment of tragedy, but about understanding how one event could set in motion a cascade of consequences. It was a story about the limits of control, of how even the most regimented program, designed to erase personal identity and enforce obedience, can falter in the face of deep human connection. For Bucky, that realization was both a curse and a catalyst. Every skirmish, every confrontation with his past, was a mosaic piece contributing to the larger picture of his inescapable legacy, a legacy that included not only his transformation into a weapon, but also an unrelenting internal struggle with the ghosts of orders once followed without question. And so, as the narrative weaves itself into the larger mythos of the Marvel Universe, it beckons us to look closer at the interplay between fate, free will, and the often painful truth that sometimes the chains of duty are forged in the fires of coercion. It draws our attention to the silent, almost imperceptible moments where history and destiny converge, the chance encounters, the split-second decisions, the missed signals of a conscience that was buried but never entirely extinguished. Bucky Barnes, caught between the legacy of an organization that sought to sculpt his very being and the remnants of a self that fought desperately to break free, stands as a tragic figure, a man whose every step was measured by the twin inevitabilities of memory and regret. In the end, the theory that the Winter Soldier was responsible for the demise of Peter Parker's parents is more than a simple narrative twist. It is a meditation on the nature of sacrifice, the cost of war, and the unyielding quest for redemption that defines us all. It challenges us to reconsider the often hidden costs of loyalty to a cause, even when that cause is shrouded in the noblest of intentions. It reminds us that the lives of the humble, the ordinary, and the loved are sometimes caught in the crossfire of decisions made in the name of national security, a reality as bitter as it is real. And for those left behind, like Peter Parker, the mystery of a lost family becomes both the weight of grief and the spark of relentless inquiry, a driving force behind a destiny forged in the flames of tragedy and the determination to redeem a past marred by the mistaken use of power. This is the tale that lingers in the whispers of operatives and in the quiet reflections of a hero's journey, a tale where the lines blur between the light of heroism and the deep shadows of a past that refuses to be forgotten. In every retelling, there is a call not only for answers but for understanding, a realization that even in the darkest moments of immortal conflict, the smallest human stories can change the course of history. And so the legend endures, a poignant reminder that heroes, despite their extraordinary abilities, are forever bound by the same fragile humanity that makes every choice, every lost life, and every sacrifice a story worth remembering. The truth about that fateful night may never be fully revealed, concealed behind layers of memories and orders given in a time of unimaginable pressure. But the enduring theory that on that cold, unforgiving night, the Winter Soldier, with all his internal torment and manipulated purpose, took a life that would echo through the annals of a hero's legacy, serves as a stark emblem of the cost at which our legends are often forged. It is a chronicle written not in the gleam of victory, but in the quiet sorrow of what must be sacrificed, a warning that in the relentless pursuit of an illusory order, the most cherished parts of our personal stories can be lost forever. Bucky Barnes, forever caught in the incessant struggle between his imposed duty and his own buried desires for redemption, carries with him the haunting possibility that he may have been the unwitting architect of a tragedy that befell Richard and Mary Parker. His existence is a labyrinth of remorse and unspoken truths, a journey that defies easy categorization as hero or villain. And as we listen to his story, interlaced with the theory that his past actions contributed irrevocably to the vanishing of a family destined to give the world one of its greatest heroes, we are reminded of the eternal truth that every life, every secret, and every decision echoes through time in ways too profound for simple explanation. In a universe bursting with cosmic battles, superhuman feats, and the constant interplay of destiny and choice, this theory, the idea that even the most tragic betrayals can have roots in a legacy of honor twisted by fate, resonates deep. It speaks of a time when a single mission in the icy grip of winter not only ended lives, but also cascaded into an everlasting legacy of mystery and loss. It is a narrative that compels us to remember that behind every shield, every suit of armor, and every spark of extraordinary ability, there exists a tapestry of choices made in the shadowy interstices of power and vulnerability. And in that tapestry, the story of Richard and Mary Parker, entwined with that of the Winter Soldier, is etched as a sobering chronicle of the unpredictable, often tragic intersections of destiny and duty. As we trace the steps of a past filled with covert operations and moral ambiguity, the mosaic of this theory becomes ever more intricate. A blend of whispered recollections, classified files, half-understood directives, and the deeply personal remorse of a man forever trying to escape the chains of his own making. Through every fragmented piece of evidence and every emotional murmur that escapes in moments of solitude, the legend of that fateful encounter endures, a persistent, haunting refrain that beckons us to look beyond the surface of legends and see the human cost behind the myth. In the grand final analysis, the story of the Winter Soldier and the mysterious fate of Peter Parker's parents is ultimately a meditative exploration of the inherent complexity of human nature. It is a story about how every individual, regardless of the roles assigned by fate, must grapple with the consequences of actions taken under duress, the weight of orders given in the name of a cause, and the eternal struggle between duty and compassion. It is a reminder that in a world built on battles between cosmic forces, the most profound tragedies are those that occur in the silent moments. Moments lost to time, engraved in the souls of those who bear witness to the cruel intersection of destiny, manipulation, the indomitable spark of a lost humanity. And so this theory lives on, passed down from one passionate storyteller to the next, quietly challenging the sanitized narratives of official histories and inviting us to look deeper. It is a tale that compels us to acknowledge that every legend, every hero, and every moral quandary in the Marvel Universe is interlaced with the silent tragedies of unnoticed sacrifices and unintended consequences. The quiet, sorrowful truth that might connect the Winter Soldier to the vanishing of the Parker family is not a simple matter of black and white. Rather, it is an enduring, complex mosaic of memory, manipulation, and a search for redemption that continues to captivate the hearts of those who dare to listen. In the final reckoning, whether the theory stands as an enigmatic possibility or as a concrete piece of the larger Marvel mythos, its impact is undeniable. It offers a glimpse into the intricate workings of a world where even the darkest actions can give birth to questions of hope, where every unsolved mystery is a call to delve deeper into the maze of human decisions and moral dilemmas. For Peter Parker, locked in a quest for justice and truth, the specter of his parents' fate remains an unyielding force, a driving factor in his transformation from a timid youth into a determined hero. And for us, the listeners and believers in these interwoven legends, it is a story that exemplifies the tragic beauty of a past that, no matter how deeply buried, will always resurface in the relentless pursuit of truth and redemption. Then, as we close this chapter of whispered theories and partially recalled memories, we accept that the lives of those involved, the Parkers, the Winter Soldier, and every shadowy figure caught amid the chaos of covert warfare, are bound by the same eternal truth, that heroism and tragedy are but two sides of the same coin, spun by the capricious hand of fate. Their stories, forever entwined in a narrative filled with grief and occasional glimmers of hope, remind us that even in a universe of gods and monsters, the most profound truths are found in the quiet human moments where choices are made and destinies are forever altered. Every word of this tale, every scrap of evidence, and every lingering doubt serves as an invitation, a call to question, to understand, and to embrace the uncomfortable complexity of a legacy built on sacrifice and sorrow. The theory of the Winter Soldier's involvement in the demise of Richard and Mary Parker is not merely an addition to the myth. It is a resonant theme in a saga defined by the relentless clash between duty and desire, control and humanity. And in that reverberating clash, the echoes of a single fateful mission continue to shape the destiny of one of Marvel's most enduring legacies. In this way, the narrative endures, a living, breathing story that challenges us to look beyond what is presented at face value, to question the force that drives men to follow orders unthinkingly, and to recognize that even in the cold calculations of espionage, there remains an indelible mark of humanity, regret, and the unending quest for redemption. This is the story of the Parker family and the Winter Soldier, a tale woven in the silent depths of history, where every decision, every lost life, and every quiet moment of hesitation paints a portrait of a world forever changed by the inexorable pull of fate. And so, as the years stretch on, and the myths of yesterday blend with the legends of tomorrow, this theory remains, a haunting reminder that in every corner of the Marvel Universe, history is not just written in the battles won or lost, but in the quiet, sorrowful echoes of decisions made in the dead of winter, where one man's haunted past becomes the silent architect of a future that neither he nor anyone else could ever truly control. There was a time when shadows danced on the walls of history, and as the world of heroes and villains intertwined, A murmur of conspiracy grew louder than the clash of metal and the murmur of whispered secrets. In the dim corridors of power, where loyalty was as fragile as the paper it was written on, the tale began to unfold. A tale not of simple heroism, but of the dark underbelly of secret organizations, the hidden hands that guided destinies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The story starts with a careful examination of actions taken years earlier, when covert missions were laid out behind the facade of patriotism and honor, weaving the threads that would eventually connect the enigmatic Winter Soldier to a grim act of vengeance on those who had unwittingly become targets. Long before Spider-Man's destiny was fully realized in a bustling New York City, a series of calculated eliminations had taken place across the globe. Hydra, an organization steeped in ancient conspiracies and clandestine objectives, had long mastered the art of sending shivers down the spine of those in power. Their method was precision, their instruments the highly trained operatives whose loyalty was assured by a cocktail of ideologies and implanted codes. Among these operatives, one figure loomed larger than the rest, a man known as the Winter Soldier. The Winter Soldier, a name that echoed through underground circles, was not merely a ghost or a specter haunting the corridors of memory. He was an executioner, a vessel of Hydra's will. On those cold nights of operation, it was said that he vanished into the dark folds of his past and re-emerged always with the same mission. A mission to eliminate those whose existence was intertwined with the secret operations of S.H.I.E.L.D. A careful observation of the MCU's historical precedents reveals that on several occasions, his target list included figures of immense influence. One of the foremost illustrations of this pattern was the calculated assassination of Howard Stark, an iconic figure whose genius had not only birthed technological marvels, but had also paved the way for the very infrastructure of S.H.I.E.L.D. It was in that silence following the gunshot echoing across a refined wooden study that Hydra's cold precision was unmistakably pronounced. The mission was not about personal vendetta, nor was it a shadow of political rivalry. It was a predetermined act meant to prune the branches of a far-reaching conspiracy. The tapestry of Hydra's dark deeds continued to unwind as whispers of another calculated killing surfaced. Along with Howard Stark, his beloved wife Maria was also taken from the world in an act that bore the hallmark of the Winter Soldier's lethal precision. It wasn't long before conspiracy theorists began to notice a sinister pattern, men and women linked not by personal enmity or random cruelty, but by the ethereal threads of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s involvement. Once considered mere operatives or inventors, these individuals were, in hindsight, pawns in a grander design orchestrated by shadowy figures across the globe. As these historical precedents took hold in the minds of those who observed the unfolding phenomenon, the tale unraveled further with the introduction of another character who possessed connections just as significant. Richard and Mary Parker. In the sprawling pages of comic book lore, Peter Parker's parents are seldom portrayed as common citizens in any ordinary sense. There are layers of intrigue involving espionage, secrets, and an affiliation with S.H.I.E.L.D. Their background, carefully detailed in narratives spanning decades, told the story of two individuals who were not simply researchers or academics, but agents intertwined with the very fabric of clandestine operations. Their lives were steeped in the subterfuge and betrayal that only a world like that of S.H.I.E.L.D. could offer. In this retelling, the threads connecting them to major covert missions were more robust than a mere coincidence would suggest. The story of Richard and Mary Parker was a tale of passion, dedication, and sacrifice, much like the countless unsung heroes who had traversed the labyrinth of conspiracy and covert operations. They had been recruited at a young age, groomed for a life of subtle heroism where the battlefield was one of secrets and deception rather than open warfare. Their loyalty to S.H.I.E.L.D. was as deep-rooted as a tree in ancient soil, and yet, with their identities shrouded in mystery, the connection between their destiny and the leaps of fate constructed by Hydra was an undeniable possibility. To those who studied the intricacies of the MCU narrative, this connection ignited a spark. A theory suggesting that the very same methods employed to silence bigger, more politically significant targets might have been reapplied to the Parkers, whose covert roles and connections made them viable targets in the shadows of Hydra's long game. Delving deeper into that possibility, one cannot overlook the significance of trigger words. Those seemingly innocuous terms that, upon being uttered in the right sequence, serve to activate a dormant persona or direct an assassin into immediate action. Among these potent words, homecoming emerged as one of particular note. In the murky operational manual of the Winter Soldier, homecoming was more than a reference to a return or a reunion. It had a far-reaching implication, The word resonated with those who recognized its potential to serve a double entendre. 1. The literal notion of a return to one's roots. And 2. The contextual link to Spider-Man. Homecoming, a film that marked a significant moment in the life of Peter Parker. Imagine a scenario where Homecoming, on its surface seemingly a fitting tribute to a triumphant return of a young hero, was in reality a carefully embedded code, a signal woven into the fabric of the Winter Soldier's psychological conditioning. The audacity of such an arrangement was both ingenious and chilling. As hidden codes burned into his memory, these single words would arouse his dormant instincts and drive him to fulfill objectives that had long been suppressed and waiting for moments of calculated activation. In whispered corridors of strategy discussions, the mere utterance of Homecoming once sent ripples down the spine of agents who understood the consequence of such triggers. It was in this shadow that the possibility arose that Peter Parker's parents, having been implicated through their covert service with S.H.I.E.L.D., might have attracted the attention of Hydra's secret operations. This theory did not arise in isolation. It was bolstered by countless breadcrumbs that the cinematic universe had scattered over the years. The timeline of the Winter Soldier's missions was an artifact on its own, a meticulously arranged sequence of events that, when closely examined, hinted at an alignment that resonated with the time frame of the Parker's untimely end. Each mission undertaken by the Winter Soldier was marked by precision, leaving behind a trail that was as detailed as it was lethal. His operations were not conducted in vacuums. They were deeply interwoven with the political and covert undertakings of S.H.I.E.L.D., and they reflected the unsettling realization that Hydra had been orchestrating a silent purge long before the public at large ever suspected it. In those early days, a combination of desperate precision and an agenda that aimed to secure clandestine dominance converged in a series of operations that left many influential figures removed from the equation. Deliberate targeting of individuals associated with S.H.I.E.L.D. meant that those who were mere players in the background suddenly found themselves on a collision course with destiny. The disappearance of questionably vital individuals, a pattern that included key scientists, strategists, and even secret benefactors, pointed sharply towards an agenda that was both vast and benevolent to Hydra's vision. Within this labyrinth of deceptions, the Parker's fate beckoned. Amid the haze of covert operations and half-whispered explanations, a few sharp minds began piecing together the clues that had been so meticulously scattered by Hydra. Was it possible that Richard and Mary Parker, with their storied connections to S.H.I.E.L.D., were not mere footnotes in a heroic legacy, but key targets in a broader scheme of suppression? In the eyes of those who delved into the annals of secret agent chronicles, a connection emerged. Their past, as reconstructed from obscure dossiers and hidden memoirs, showed that they had once been critical cogs in the intricate machinery that enabled S.H.I.E.L.D. to operate, gathering and analyzing intelligence that would eventually shape the fate of nation. By eliminating these pivotal figures, Hydra would not only weaken S.H.I.E.L.D.'s dynamic network, but also send a resounding message. No one was safe from the covert forces operating in the shadows. The notion of using the Winter Soldier as an instrument of destruction against such figures was not far-fetched when one considers his training, his psychological conditioning, and the strategic importance placed upon his actions over the decades. Each mission was executed with the cold precision of a well-rehearsed symphony, where the notes were not music, but rather the finality of lives extinguished and legacies erased. Hydra's shadow had always encompassed the world of espionage, and the deliberate targeting of those with advanced networks of communication and influence served to weaken S.H.I.E.L.D.'s hold on global affairs. One can almost trace the timeline of the operation as if it were a meticulously documented case file. It began years before Peter Parker became the beloved neighborhood hero we all cheered for, when the early whispers of covert reassignments and disavowals began to manifest in the hidden records of S.H.I.E.L.D. There were meetings held behind locked doors, where strategy was discussed in hushed tones and loyalty was weighed against the cost of dissent. It was in these eras, a time when every operative had to decide between obeying orders or taking a treacherous leap towards a higher moral ground, that the seeds of betrayal were sown. The Winter Soldier, whose loyalties had been twisted and repurposed by Hydra, was dispatched like a A-list ghost. His missions correlated with the strategic removal of individuals who could threaten the carefully calibrated equilibrium between chaos and order in the covert world. As the plot thickened, it became increasingly clear that there was a pattern not just in the nature of the targets, but in the timing of the hits. The chronological alignment of the Winter Soldier's known missions with the presumed time frame of the Parker's fatal encounter was a mystery that demanded vigilance. In the annals of secret history, when dates were cross-examined against events, subtle hints emerged. These hints, when connected like pieces of a vast jigsaw puzzle, painted an unsettling picture, a timeline that would make even the most stoic analyst shudder. In this timeline, the Parkers' demise, which had long been mourned as a tragic accident or lost in the sands of a mundane criminal investigation, now reappeared as a deliberate erasure designed to silence those who might have carried too many secrets about the inner workings of S.H.I.E.L.D. Between the lines of the official records, dark recesses of memory hinted at covert operations that never made it into the public eye. Sources once trusted and now long disavowed suggested that on the very nights when the Winter Soldier was known to have carried out other missions that shook the foundations of power in key strategic locations, there were inexplicable gaps in the communication archives of S.H.I.E.L.D. Those gaps, when scrutinized, aligned uncannily with the period when Richard and Mary Parker were last recorded as active in the field. It was as if their very existence was erased with surgical precision, their contributions undermined by a higher force unwilling to risk the exposure of long-buried secrets. Whispers in the dark corridors of espionage hinted that the Parkers might have been privy to intelligence that no ordinary personnel were meant to uncover. Tales passed in secret safe houses recounted the rare moments when the Parkers had been seen interacting with other high-value figures from S.H.I.E.L.D. and their involvement in missions that transcended ordinary reconnaissance. They were not just agents, they were trusted confidants, carrying knowledge that could topple regimes or ignite revolutions if it fell into the wrong hands. For Hydra, controlling such explosive knowledge meant controlling the narrative of power itself. By silencing these individuals, the organization not only neutralized an immediate threat but also sent a long-lasting message to anyone who might dare to challenge their hidden dominion. Equally enthralling was the cryptic significance of the trigger word homecoming, a signal that resonated with layered meaning beyond its surface allure of reunion. In the programming of the Winter Soldier's conditioned responses, every word was a trigger, every phrase a bell that awakened a dormant instinct. But homecoming held a special place. It was embedded in the operational training given to the Winter Soldier, a training module that emphasized loyalty, identity, and the painful reclaiming of lost parts of the self. The irony of the word's usage was palpable. A trigger meant to return him to a state of unnerving efficiency was tied, in an almost poetic twist of fate, to a film that celebrated the youthful exuberance and resilience of a burgeoning hero. In this duality, the narrative knew a twist, a moment when the literal and the metonymic converged into a labyrinthine riddle meant only for those who were willing to decode its double meaning. The word homecoming mingled with the echoes of the Winter Soldier's past, evoking memories of missions long past, and the autopsy of his shattered humanity. As he moved through the hidden alleys of his mind, fragments of sentiments, loyalty, regret, determination flashed by, each one reinforcing his role as an instrument of Hydra's will. Behind the cold mask of the assassin lay a man who had once known love, loss, and a desperate search for meaning in the chaos of war-torn memories. And what better trigger word could be used to coax such a man into the throes of his duty than one that symbolized the return to his origin? It was a calculated move, one that played on the intricate layers of psychology and narrative symbolism that were hallmarks of Hydra's modus operandi. The operational manuals, if one could call them that, recorded dates and times when messages had been sent to the Winter Soldier, a record of communications that might have been dismissed as mere technicality had it not been for the consistent emergence of homecoming in critical moment. Analysts poring over classified timelines noted the eerie pattern. Every significant drop in S.H.I.E.L.D. communications, every sudden removal of personnel bore the unmistakable hallmarks of a trigger. And as the pieces fell into place, a pattern emerged that couldn't be easily ignored. The Parkers, already enmeshed in the covert network of agents and operatives, were marked by the same dark design, their final moments hidden away in records that had long been classified and presumably erased, now gained clarity. There existed an almost cinematic symmetry in the way events unfolded, a fatal dance where one rhythmic beat led directly to another. The Winter Soldier's missions, often shrouded in mystery and executed with clinical precision, carried the unmistakable stamp of Hydra's intent. A silent purge was underway, one targeted at the potential threat that could arise from the very network of knowledge that S.H.I.E.L.D. had cultivated over decades. The removal of key personnel wasn't an isolated occurrence. It was part of an intricate mosaic, each operation mindful of its place in a narrative that stretched across years and continents. As the timeline of these events began to interlock, the alleged alignment with the period when the Parkers were active came into focus. It was in the subtle interplay of repeated missions, overlaps of critical dates, and inexplicable lapses in official records that one could detect the deliberate hand of Hydra steering its puppets into oblivion. In cities where the neon lights masked the quiet despair of forgotten souls, and in remote hideouts where secrets were consigned to the dust of abandoned records, operatives whispered to one another in careful circles about the true nature of these absences. They recalled how, during periods of high activity for the Winter Soldier, communications from certain sectors of S.H.I.E.L.D. would either vanish or be retroactively altered. Such erasures were never openly acknowledged. They were simply accepted as necessary collateral in a larger war fought in the shadows. And yet, for those who managed to piece together the fragmentary evidence, the conclusion was inescapable. The Parkers, long believed to have perished in accidents or lesser crimes, were victims of a far more ruthless strategy than anyone had the courage to admit aloud. The stirring narrative of espionage and strategic elimination took on an almost mythic quality, a saga recounting how behind every heroic ascent lay a series of carefully orchestrated sacrifices. The Winter Soldier, central to this dark chapter, was more than just an assassin born out of manipulation and war. He was a symbol of Hydra's unyielding ambition to control the intangible threads of influence that determined the fate of nations. His operations echoed like a refrain across the cold halls of hidden vaults and secret archives, each note resonating with a message that no legacy was too storied, no influence too deep, that it would not be pruned if it threatened the predetermined order. In this chronicle of hidden battles and unspoken truths, the Parkers' potential ties to S.H.I.E.L.D. emerged as a poignant subplot. Their personal dreams and clandestine achievements were woven into a fabric that not only enriched the narrative of covert heroism, but also provided a tantalizing thread that linked them directly to the overarching design of Hydra. There were oral histories, passed down among operatives in hushed tones over decades, recounting personal interactions with the Parkers. Some recalled meetings in dimly lit safe houses, where discussions of intelligence over cups of bitter coffee transcended the mundane and alluded to secrets that could shift the balance of power on a global scale. These stories became the fodder for conspiracy theorists and historians alike, all of whom began to suspect that the Parkers' untimely end was not the tragic result of a random act of violence, but rather the deliberate choice of an organization that valued silence over revelation. As the narrative proceeded with relentless determination, the focus shifted to the critical details in the timeline, the precise moments when the Winter Soldier's missions were carried out. Military archives and covert field reports hinted at a correlation too consistent to be dismissed as mere coincidence. Late-night radio transmissions, intercepted in moments of crisis, occasionally mentioned code words and operation names that, when decrypted, aligned disturbingly with the years in which key personnel had mysteriously vanished. At one point, a retired intelligence officer recounted a personal encounter in which a seemingly innocuous remark about a homecoming event in a far-off city inadvertently led to a chain of events that culminated in the erasure of a prominent S.H.I.E.L.D. asset. The officer's testimony was filled with hesitation and veiled references, but for those who had been following the trail of breadcrumbs left behind by Hydra's operatives, the message was unmistakable. This particular recollection, mingling memory with fragments of classified operations, illuminated the role that trigger words played in synchronizing Hydra's dark symphony of eliminations. Homecoming was the sonic emblem of this strategy, an auditory cue that somehow carried with it not just a signal but a promise of action. The idea that such a benign-sounding word could bear such lethal consequences was a reflection of Hydra's penchant for subterfuge. It was as if the organization had taken a word that, on the surface, evoked images of reunion and celebration, and twisted it into a weapon capable of activating a dormant force within one man's soul. Inside the labyrinthine corridors of Hydra-controlled communication networks, there were believed to be files so deeply classified that their existence was known only to a few select individuals. In these files, triggers, dates, and target names were listed alongside cryptic notes that would illuminate the guild of decisions being made in real time. When experts cross-referenced these notes with information gleaned from declassified operational reports, the pattern emerged with a stark clarity. The Winter Soldier's missions, cataloged with precise timestamps and operational details, corresponded exactly with the timeframe in which communications about the Parkers were either abruptly curtailed or suspiciously reclassified. For those with the courage to question what concealed histories had been constructed behind official records, the evidence was as compelling as it was disturbing. The narrative that unfolded did not simply rely on the probability of chance or random acts of violence. Instead, it argued for a deliberate, almost orchestrated sequence of events, a chain reaction initiated by Hydra's long-lost will to mold history according to its own nefarious design. Every eliminated target, every opportunistic removal of a potential threat to their global agenda, was the result of calculated tactics that had been refined over decades of clandestine operations. The murder of prominent figures, including those with direct ties to S, served not only one immediate tactical purpose, but also the broader aim of consolidating Hydra's influence by ensuring that no loose ends remained in their complex web of espionage. As the story unspooled further, the narrative took on an almost mythological quality, a tale where the actions of one man, the Winter Soldier, encapsulated the dark heart of a centuries-old struggle between hidden orders. His mission to silence the voices of those who had the potential to expose covert operations was not a series of isolated strikes. It was part of an overarching plan to reshape the balance of power in the unseen war between order and chaos. In this dark intersection, the Parkers, with their Shield affiliations, emerged as unintended casualties of a strategy that prioritized secrecy above all else. Their death, while lamented in the official histories as nothing more than an unfortunate casualty in a turbulent period, was reinterpreted by those who dared to look beyond the surface as a calculated excision, a necessary sacrifice to maintain the integrity of the grand conspiracy. When the pieces of the puzzle began to converge in the minds of those who pieced together classified data from decades past with more recent accounts, the connection became nearly undeniable. Details that had once been dismissed as mere coincidences, a correlation of data, shared link in backgrounds, the presence of a trigger word that echoed across multiple missions, now formed the backbone of a hypothesis that sent shockwaves through the underground corridors of espionage circles. Former agents, now retired and shrouded by decades of silence, cautiously began to speak of a world where nothing was as it seemed. They recalled late nights in safe houses where coded messages were casually thrown into conversation, hints dropped like breadcrumbs for those who knew how to listen. In their recollections was the unspoken realization that the Parkers' fates were intertwined with a much larger narrative of control, one that had been engineered far beyond the scope of any conventional criminal act. The narrative grew richer as survivors and remnants of old SHIELD operations pieced together accounts from forgotten eyewitnesses. One such account told of an encounter in a dimly lit underground station, a place where whispers of conspiracies were traded in hushed confidences. An operative, whose identity remained forever unconfirmed, recalled a conversation overheard between two anonymous figures discussing the timing of an upcoming operation. They mentioned a homecoming in the context of a coordinated strike against individuals seen as threats to the secrecy. SHIELD. The words hung in the air, their implications far greater than the moment might suggest. This snippet, replayed time and again in the retelling of the narrative, served as a reminder that no word was innocent, no assignment mere coincidence. Each detail, down to the very phrases used, contributed to an intricately choreographed dance of obfuscation and elimination. In the unfolding story of the MCU, where every shadow conceals a history, and each whispered word opens Pandora's box of possibility, the intersection of the Winter Soldier's missions and the fate of the Parkers remains one of the most tantalizing enigmas. Over the years, the intermingling of factual operational history with the legends of comic book lore has given birth to a theory that, while speculative in parts, is anchored by countless bits of corroborative evidence. Every calculated hit carried out by the Winter Soldier, every mission logged in the hidden annals of espionage, reinforced the notion that each Hydra's reach extended deeper and uglier than many had dared to imagine. The evidence, when viewed through the meticulous lens of time, illustrated a continuity, an unbroken stream of covert excellence, punctuated by precise activations triggered by a single word. To those who studied the timeline with unwavering focus, the chronological alignment of events was not a series of parallel accidents. It was a deliberate orchestration that placed the Parkers in the crosshairs of a master plan, woven long before they ever considered the risks of Secret Service. There was a method to the madness. Every removal, every silent warning sent through erased records, pointed to a mechanism of control, a method by which Hydra would prune the branches of SHIELD that threatened to reveal the dark underpinnings of the organization's true nature. As the narrator of this saga, one must pause to recount not only the events themselves, but the cultural atmosphere in which they transpired. In a world that was rapidly evolving from the rustle of wartime propaganda to the digital symphony of modern global surveillance, the actions of Winter Soldier resonated as an echo from a time when allegiances were easily bought with loyalty and manipulated via the slightest hint of a code word. The stories of those who had witnessed firsthand the chilling efficiency of the covert operations were carved in memory. Their recollections, though marred by the imprecision of time and the fog of incomplete details, began to crystallize into an incontrovertible narrative. Behind each silent casualty, behind each erased life that once might have stood as a beacon of She's promise, was the unmistakable signature of Hydra's unstated command. And so, as threads of whispered truth interwove with the official records, the hypothesis that the Parker's death was the result of a meticulously engineered mission orchestrated by the Winter Soldier began to take hold with a gravity that could not be ignored. The generational gap between old operatives and the current crop of heroes provided fertile ground for myth-making, a myth that was cemented not in fantasy but in cold, hard evidence discovered through the painstaking cross-referencing of timelines, trigger words, contextual events that echoed across the MCU's storied history. The notion that a hero's legacy, however luminous, could be shadowed by the dark machinations of those who worked behind closed doors was a concept that resonated deeply with an audience that had grown accustomed to the fine line between light and darkness. In the final analysis, the story of the Winter Soldier and the fateful demise of Peter Parker's parents emerged as a confluence of history, undercover operations, and the stark realization that sometimes, even the noblest origins could be tainted by hidden agendas. The evidence, scattered across decades and intricately woven into the tapestry of clandestine history, painted a picture that was as enthralling as it was harrowing. Every detail, from the calculated elimination of pivotal figures like Howard and Maria Stark, to the smaller, seemingly inconsequential details surrounding Richard and Mary Parker's shadowy past, contributed to a grander narrative that defied easy explanation. It was a narrative of betrayal and sacrifice, of orders executed without question, and of lives snuffed out with the ruthlessness of a cold winter's wind. For those who took the time to study the underlying mechanics of espionage in the MCU, no detail was too minor, and no coincidence was truly accidental. A glance at the operational logs would reveal that the signatures of Hydra's interventions were etched in every calculated decision, every covert maneuver. In the dance of shadow and light, where heroes and villains were defined not solely by their actions, but by the intricate histories that led them to those actions. This theory stood as a stark reminder that sometimes the greatest villains are those who hide behind layers of deception and orchestrate events with a single chilling directive. Thus, the evidence supporting the theory that the Winter Soldier, as a prime agent of Hydra, was responsible for the elimination of Spider-Man's parents is built upon a solid foundation of historical precedents from within the MCU. Each piece of the puzzle, the meticulous targeting of figures connected with S.H.I.E.L.D., the uncanny background ties of the Parkers, the strategic activation using the trigger word homecoming, and the precise chronological overlap of these missions, wove together a narrative of conspiracy and hidden motives that continues to keep even the most discerning audience on edge. It was a story that, like the heroes themselves, was far from black or white. Instead, it was a tale smudged with the gray hues of human frailty, moral ambiguity, and the often cold and unyielding demands of a secret war fought in the shadows. In this unfolding epic of clandestine operations and fateful decisions, the subtle interplay between memory and method, between the personal past of a deeply troubled soldier and the dark ambitions of a global secret organization, created a storyline that was as layered as it was engaging. The narrative carried its audience along a winding path of discovery, revealing clues that pointed ever more clearly to the tragic and calculated loss of potential greatness through the foreboding hand of Hydra. Every whispered conversation, every intercepted communication, every piece of evidence found in dusty, forgotten files added another layer of depth to the narrative. A narrative that strove to answer one of the MCU's most enduring mysteries. As we journey back through these time-worn corridors of secret histories, it becomes evident that the assault on those tied to S.H.I.E.L.D., an elite network dedicated to safeguarding humanity from unseen dangers, was not merely a series of isolated tragedies. Instead, it was a sweeping, deliberate purge aimed at quelling any potential threat that could jeopardize the vast and labyrinthine plans of Hydra. And among these calculated removals, the demise of Peter Parker's parents took on a particularly poignant note. Their lives, interconnected with layers of expectancy, mystery, and duty, were as significant as they were emblematic of an era when loyalty was bought with sacrifice and every operation bore the risk of permanent loss. In this meticulous reconstruction of events, one must consider the dark irony that often accompanies the hero's journey. In a world where every act of bravery has its counterpart in the cold calculus of secret organizations, the heroic ascent of Spider-Man was juxtaposed against the tragedy of his origins, a tragedy that, when unraveled, revealed a conspiracy steeped in decades of covert machinations. The Parkers, though once envisioned as victims of fate's cruel hand, might indeed have been the unintended casualties of a much more sinister agenda. As the evidence is closely examined, the calculated elimination of key figures in the covert world of S.H.I.E.L.D. appears to leave little room for the possibility of random chance. Every operation undertaken by the Winter Soldier, from the precise takedown of major players to the silencing of those who dared to expose hidden truths, underscores a profound commitment to an agenda that, if fully realized, would forever alter the trajectory of superhero legacies. In the underlying narrative, the activation of the trigger word homecoming in the Winter Soldier's mental architecture becomes more than just a momentary flash of a command. It is the embodiment of Hydra's overarching strategy. This word, echoing through the soldier's recollections of loss, duty, and a yearning for a semblance of identity, served as a catalyst for his lethal dispatches, each one marking a chapter in an unfolding saga of control. It was not accidental that the same word that heralded a return to normalcy in one story became the fatal cue in another, drawing a direct line between the seemingly disparate worlds of a beloved modern hero and a ghost from the darkest reaches of covert operation. The irony was not lost on those who dared delve into the intricacies of this theory. It spoke to a narrative strategy that manipulated narrative expectations and subverted them by revealing the hidden truth behind acts of calculated violence. In the end, the narrative is one of layered mysteries and interwoven destinies. A story where heroes and villains are not easily distinguished by the color of their capes or their public personas. The historical precedents within the MCU, the implied connections between S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Parkers, the chilling activation triggered by the word homecoming, and the alignment of events over an extended timeline, all converge into a single dark hypothesis. It is a hypothesis crafted not in isolation, but in the long hours of study and the silent confession of those privy to the hidden truths of the secret war, fought in the shadows. For the audience that yearns to learn the deeper layers of the Marvel narrative, this theory is a testament to the complexity of a universe where every victory comes at a cost, where every sacrifice is hidden behind layers of secrecy, and where the deepest conspiracies can reshape the very essence of what we hold as truth. The story of the Winter Soldier and the tragic end of Richard and Mary Parker is a tragedy of epic proportions, one where power, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of hidden objectives intertwine in a dance as old as time itself. In the unfolding tapestry of the MCU, where myth and reality dance side by side, the evidence is as compelling as it is chilling. It forces us to confront the unsettling possibility that even in a universe filled with shining heroes and valiant struggles, the shadows remain a constant. Within those shadows lie the dark orchestrations of an organization that will stop at nothing to secure its vision of order, no matter how many lives must be sacrificed in the process. This story, layered with tension, historical significance, and a subtle interplay of trigger words and fateful alignments, invites us to peer behind the veil of conventional narratives and accept that not all endings are penned by the hand of destiny, but sometimes they are meticulously crafted by forces unseen. In every calculated mission, in every erased record and hushed conversation, the ghostly imprint of the Winter Soldier's actions remains a haunting reminder that truth, however deeply buried, always finds a way to emerge. And it is in this emergence, the interplay of evidence, memory, and carefully chosen words that we find the narrative of a man conscripted to silence the voices of potential heroes, and in doing so, alter the very course of what was meant to be a legacy of hope. The chilling precision of his operations melded with the timeless enigma of his past, and through every trigger word uttered in the dead of night, the dark legacy of Hydra was reaffirmed. Thus, as the story winds through the corridors of clandestine history, It is impossible to disregard the significance of the meticulous evidence that points to a deliberate and calculated purge of all those who might jeopardize an unseen order. The Winter Soldier, in his tragic complexity, stands as both executor and victim, a man whose every action under Hydra's command helped shape a destiny much darker than most could have imagined. And the fates of Richard and Mary Parker, entwined with secrets too perilous to remain unearthed, provide a sobering counterpoint to the heroism that was destined to come later. In recounting these events, we are reminded that in a year replete with fantastical powers and extraordinary individuals, it is the quiet, unseen actions of operatives in the dark that often dictate the future. The whispers of covert operations, the vibrations of trigger words like homecoming in the depths of a troubled soul, and the silent removal of those who might otherwise have changed the tide of history, all converge to form a narrative that is as gripping as any epic hero tale. Each element, each finely tuned detail, adds to a climax that only reveals itself to those willing to question every assumption. And so, as the legacy of Spider-Man is forever etched into the annals of superhero lore, the darker story of his origins is laid bare. A story where evidence supports a theory far more unsettling than a mere random tragedy, where every thread pulled reveals a larger tapestry of betrayal. The Winter Soldier's cold hands, guided by a remorseless organization, had reached into the very fabric of destiny, severing the ties that might have woven a different future. It is a story that invites endless questions, challenges preconceived narratives, and dares us to explore the murky intersections of secret service and destiny in a universe where even the brightest light casts the darkest shadow. In the end, the evidence speaks for itself in this intricate tale of conspiracies and covert operations. A tale where historical precedents, potential ties to S.H.I.E.L.D., the ominous significance of trigger words, and the precise alignment of events come together in a narrative so compelling, so meticulously woven that it demands not only belief, but a re-examination of everything we thought we knew about the origins of our favorite heroes. It is the story of a clandestine purge executed with ruthless efficiency, the story of a man whose mind was shackled by programmed obedience, and the story of a legacy forever altered by forces that dared to operate in the shadows. Every fragment of the past, every whispered secret from dimly lit safe houses, and every halting recollection of those once entrusted with guarding the truth, now echoes in unison with the mission of the Winter Soldier. In retracing the chronology of his mission, we witness the unyielding logic of an agenda built on the removal of any potential threat to a hidden order. A vengeance wrought through carefully timed strikes, which when pieced together leave us with no choice but to confront the possibility that Spider-Man's parents were merely collateral damage in a war waged in silence. The evidence, as it meticulously accumulates from archived operations and the vaults of classified memories, presents a narrative that is both engaging and horrifyingly logical. It is a narrative that unspools like a well-worn map of secrets, where every detail, however minute, contributes to a grander picture of control over destiny. And when you step back and view these events in their entirety, the threads of fate entwined with bureaucratic machinations and personal sacrifice become unmistakably clear. For those who understand that every heroic journey has its hidden origin, and that behind the glimmer of every triumphant return is a story of unspeakable loss and manipulation, this evidence forms an unshakable foundation for a theory that is as much about the nature of power as it is about individual heroism. It is a tale that reinforces the notion that while the heroes we celebrate are brilliant in their victories, their paths are often paved with the suppressed memories and sacrificed lives of those who came before them. In the dim light of hindsight, as we reflect on the interplay of strategic eliminations, coded commands, and the deliberate targeting of key S.H.I.E.L.D. affiliates, one thing becomes abundantly clear. The story of Spider-Man's parents is inseparable from the dark legacy left by the Winter Soldier, a legacy meticulously built over time with evidence as damning as it is revelatory. This is a narrative where every calculated mission, every correctly aligned moment, all builds toward a climax that forces us to re-examine what we believe about the origins of our heroes and the sinister forces that might have influenced their destinies from the very start. And as this elaborate tapestry of evidence continues to be studied, debated, and retold, it leaves us perpetual on the edge of discovery, a narrative that, as it has grown over countless years of hidden operations and dark agendas, remains as captivating and profound a mystery as the superhero legacies that were destined to rise from it. In the winding corridors of secret histories and fragmented truths, there exists a tale where shadows of the past blend with the rumors of the present. a tale of intrigue that weaves together the lives of a man once known as Winter Soldier and the mysterious fate of Peter Parker's parents. It is a story told by the fireside of memory, passed along in hushed tones amongst those who keep secrets close and never forget the weight of their own involvement in history's hidden layers. We begin our journey not in a single moment, but in a confluence of events and whispered legends that stretch back several pivotal years, unfolding slowly like an ancient scroll being unrolled in a dimly lit room, where every word carries weight and every pause suggests a forgotten detail waiting to be connected. It is said that Bucky Barnes, known as the Winter Soldier, bore scars that no mortal wound could heal. The scars not only on flesh but on a soul tormented by choices made long ago, under the veil of war and manipulation. In the labyrinth of shadowy operations and covert government agendas, the Winter Soldier is often painted as a mere pawn, a man forced into action, executed his orders under duress, his identity warped and hidden beneath layers of propaganda and controlled memories. Yet embedded in those layers of control and orchestrated missions lies a particular episode, a seed of possibility that some believe ties his legacy to the unsolved mystery of Peter Parker's past. Specifically, the untimely fate of Richard and Mary Parker. This connection, though never directly noted in the grand tapestry of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, lures the imagination to entertain secrets and hidden agendas that may bleed into the main narrative of the heroes we know and cherish. In one corner of his complex path, Bucky Barnes found himself entangled in missions that took him through the underbelly of Cold War intrigue, a period defined by the race between nations, where loyalty was as fluid as an ever-changing tide, and where the line between friend and foe blurred with every falling of the Iron Curtain. It was during these tumultuous times that Bucky, as the Winter Soldier, encountered figures who spoke in riddles and operated in the twilight between morality and necessity. Among these figures, whispers of a covert operation reached his ears, a mission that was shrouded in secrecy and spun an intricate web connecting deep governmental corruption with personal tragedy. Some of these murmurs hinted at a plan devised by unseen powers to remove any potential threats or loose ends that could jeopardize their long-term control over the international stage. And in one of those supposed loose ends, there was the family of Richard and Mary Parker, a family whose existence was at one time a beacon of quiet suburban normalcy, now seemingly reduced to lonely chapters in an unsolvable mystery. The story of the Parkers is interwoven with the fabric of espionage and bold sacrifice, their lives stealthily pulled into the clandestine operations that defined an era. According to scattered memoirs and fragmented records that have survived the passage of time, the Parkers were not strangers to the realm of covert intelligence. When Peter Parker was a child, his fate was shadowed by the involvement of governmental agencies that were desperate to recruit promising talent or eliminate potential threats. Yet, unlike most men who could have altered their destiny, Richard Parker's work in the intelligence community led him to cross paths with dangerous individuals and organizations, each with their own secretive ambitions. Mary Parker, equally enigmatic and resourceful, stood by her husband, her own history intermingled with covert operations and the inevitable risk of discovery. Together, they navigated a treacherous landscape where trust was luxuriously rare and where any misstep could unravel their carefully constructed lives. The threads of their story suggest that during one covert mission, a disastrous collision of circumstances occurred. There are those who propose that the mission Bucky Barnes was involved in, the mission that left indelible marks on his psyche, and further forged his destiny as a pawn in a vast geopolitical game, may have somehow intersected with the Parkers' final assignment. The parallels are as haunting as they are striking. Bucky, the unwilling assassin whose orders made him a tool for purposes beyond his own understanding, and the Parkers, who were similarly caught in the crossfire of a larger orchestrated design, seemed fated to be linked by the invisible hand of destiny. Though in the MCU film where visual storytelling reigns supreme, there is little to no explicit evidence or direct allusion to this connection. Some conspiracy theorists and diligent fans have always picked up on the unspoken subtext, a suggestion that had someone dared to look more closely, they might have found hidden clues in the silences left by grand narratives. In clandestine meetings behind locked doors and coded radio transmissions, it is believed that high-ranking officials discussed the removal of any potential hazards to their grand design. The Parkers, with their unique access and involvement, might have been seen as too dangerous to let continue to exist, especially if their knowledge threatened to burst forth in revelations that could disrupt the carefully balanced order of global power. In these whispered exchanges, names were mentioned, and among those names was Bucky Barnes, a man whose past was irreversibly intertwined with operations that spanned continents. Had the Parkers survived to see their fortunes altered by love or exposed to the light of day, or had they been removed with surgical precision by operatives whose loyalties were fluid and governed solely by the diktats of shadowy sovereigns? Remains a question that fuels midnight debates among the most ardent of theorists. Yet, the narrative is not without its detractors. Those who argue that incorporating such layers into an already complex cinematic universe might overburden the delicate balance of storytelling. Critics argue that the lack of direct evidence in the films is not a mere oversight, but rather a deliberate choice, a commitment to maintaining the purity of Peter Parker's emotional journey that is crafted around his personal loss and the unique genesis of his heroism. To them, the silent gaps in the MCU's presentation of this backstory are a narrative decision, one that preserves the mystery of Peter's past without resorting to contrived dramatic callbacks. They point out that when audiences are presented with clues, the power of imagination fills in the gaps, leaving room for individual interpretations and personal connections that might not be possible in a more tightly scripted universe where every thread is too neatly drawn. In alternative recountings of history, some aficionados suggest that inserting another layer involving Bucky could risk repeating themes already explored in the complex landscape of the MCU. It is already well known that Bucky's own tragic arc, featuring his involvement in a pivotal assassination linked indirectly to the downfall of Tony Stark's legacy, has resonated with audiences in a mix of horror and sorrow. To reintroduce him in a similar role, one where he might again be seen as the harbinger of loss and regret, could be perceived as a retreading of narrative territory that lacks the freshness of new perspectives. An analogy is often drawn to the echoes of a well-worn melody, one that, although beautifully executed in the right key, risks becoming monotonous if played repeatedly without variation. There is a concern that fans might sense an overdependence on the trope of remorseless duty leading to unintended collateral damage, a narrative that has already been explored in depth with other characters. The fears that such a move would inadvertently reduce each narrative to mere variations on a theme of systemic failure. A grim reminder that in the world of high stakes and secret histories, the personal often becomes secondary to the inexorable demands of political expediency. Yet, the tale endures, passing from one storyteller to another, each adding their own subtle brushstroke to a canvas that spans decades and continents. It is a story of intersections, where the paths crossed on rainy nights with the clatter of typewriters and the rustle of classified files, where every seemingly innocuous decision rippled outwards into the lives of those who sought to build a better world, even as they were entangled in forces too vast to comprehend. In quieter moments, away from the public gaze and the glare of cinematic spotlights, one might imagine Bucky Barnes standing at the edge of a forgotten pier, staring out at a turbulent sea of memories that threatened to engulf him. In that reflective solitude, the faces of both the Parkers and his own mentors, those who orchestrated his transformation into the Winter Soldier, flash across his mind like ghostly apparitions, a reminder that every life touched by such secret operations is bound by the same inescapable fate, to be forsaken by time, to be remembered only in half-truths and echoes that vanish with the dawn. In this dance of memory and myth, there emerges a unifying theme, a tragic affinity between those who are forced to commit unspeakable acts in the service of a cause larger than themselves, and those who, in their own ways, pay the ultimate price for the continuity of secrets. The narrative of the Parkers, with all its unanswered questions and speculative flourishes, serves as both a mirror and a counterpoint to the story of the Winter Soldier. Both are enigmas caught within the great machinery of power, both victims of decisions made in darkened rooms and on rain-soaked nights where every choice was made with the recognition that sometimes the truth must be sacrificed for a fragile semblance of order. In an ironic twist that seems almost too perfect for the silver screen, the lives of those who have been lost echo with the potential for redemption, a possibility that lies buried beneath layers of regret in the unyielding passage of time. To the modern listener, this amalgam of mystery, speculation, and poignant human drama transcends the limits of recorded evidence and cinematic portrayal. It invites us to look beyond what is explicitly shown and to engage with the deeper, more transformative power of storytelling, a process where contradictions are embraced and ambiguities serve as fertile ground for personal interpretation and imaginative connections. In this unfolding saga, every whispered legend, every discarded scrap of memorabilia from classified archives, and every lingering glance from a long-forgotten photograph forms part of an intricate puzzle that is as much about personal identity as it is about global events. Over the years, as the world of espionage evolved and political landscapes shifted with dizzying speed, the narrative threads linking the Winter Soldier to the enigmatic fate of Richard and Mary Parker have taken on new layers of significance. What was once dismissed as mere conjecture or an unnecessary complication in the grand tapestry of superhero lore now appears as a microcosm of an era defined by moral ambiguity and a relentless struggle for truth in a world where silence often speaks louder than words. Each retelling of these events, whether in back-alley conversations or scholarly debates, invites us to consider the possibility that the absence of a definitive connection in the films was never a flaw or an oversight. Rather, it was an intentional gap, a blank space meant for us to fill with our own questions, our own truths, and our own ideals of justice in a world that often defies easy explanations. And so, as the echoes of past deeds resonate through the present, the story of the Winter Soldier and the mysterious disappearance of the Parkers remains a living, breathing enigma, one that challenges us to question the boundaries between fate and free will, between the orchestrated plans of faceless puppet masters and the indomitable spirit of those who fight for a better tomorrow. It is a tale without a clear beginning or end, a story that refuses to be confined by the rigid lines of doctrine, and one that in all its complexity captures the essence of what it means to sacrifice, to love, and to lose in the relentless march of destiny. Amid the clamor of theories and the silent spaces left by unresolved questions, the human element endures, the longing for truth, the grief for lives unlived, and the hope that somewhere beyond the veil of conspiracy and the fog of half-remembered missions, there awaits a day when the full story will emerge. Whether Bucky Barnes was indeed complicit in an act that sealed the fate of the Parkers, or whether their disappearance was a necessary sacrifice orchestrated by forces too vast to name, remains an open, tantalizing question. It is a question that lingers long after the credits roll and the darkened theaters fall silent. A question that invites us to tune is our own understanding of justice and the cost of secret. In moments of quiet reflection, one might picture the Winter Soldier, burdened by the memories of past lives and the fractured pieces of missions long completed, standing at the crossroads of what might have been. There, beneath a star-strewn sky that has witnessed countless acts of honor and betrayal, he contemplates the weight of every command he has ever carried out, each one a step on a path that led him, perhaps unwittingly, to the fateful intersection with the destiny of the Parkers. It is in these silent reveries that we are reminded of the fragility of human existence, and of the fact that behind every myth and every legend, there lies a truth as profound as it is sorrowful, a truth woven from the threads of memory, regret, and the unyielding desire to protect what we hold dear, even when that protection comes at the highest possible cost. As our journey through these multifaceted perspectives reaches a contemplative pause, it becomes clear that the absence of undeniable cinematic evidence does not diminish the emotional and thematic impact of the speculation itself. On the contrary, the very mystery surrounding the Parkers' fate, the subtle hints of Bucky Barnes' impossible involvement, and the layered debates over narrative redundancy all serve to enrich the tapestry of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They remind us that the truth is not always found in clear-cut answers, but often in the murky depths where multiple truths coexist. A realm where personal tragedies, covert operations, and philosophical dilemmas intermingle to form a story that resonates on a deeply human level. In this ongoing saga, every whispered conversation in a dimly lit safe house, every coded message intercepted on a rainy night, and every silent gaze cast toward an unresolved past is a testament to the intricate balance between what is known and what remains hidden. It is a story that challenges us to embrace ambiguity, to celebrate the power of interpretation, and ultimately to acknowledge that the complexities of human nature can never be fully captured by the slipshod constraints of conventional narratives. Instead, they demand a narrative form that is as elusive and ever-changing as the secrets it seeks to reveal. A narrative where every theory, every counter-argument, every alternative explanation contributes to the grand mosaic of what has been and what may one day be uncovered. In the end, as we stand at the intersection of memory and myth, the story of the Winter Soldier and an unresolved chapter in the history of the Parker family becomes a symbol of our enduring quest for understanding, a quest that, despite the absence of clear evidence or definitive answers, continues to inspire us to question, to imagine, and to dream of a future where every hidden truth is finally brought into the forgiving light of day. And so, In the hushed reverence of those who have seen beyond the obvious and embraced the beauty of uncertainty, this tale remains an enduring enigma, a narrative that persists in the hearts and minds of those who believe that in every secret, every gap, and every half-remembered story lies the potential for something much greater than ourselves. Thus, as the saga unfolds in layers both intricate and profound, each a testament to the convoluted crossroads of loyalty, fate, and sacrifice, we are left to wonder, are the Parkers mere collateral damage in the sprawling machinations of hidden powers, or were they deliberate architects of their own mysterious disappearance? And could the Winter Soldier, with his tortured past and fragile sense of identity, be the unwitting link that ties these disparate threads together in a grand narrative of loss and reluctant redemption? In the flickering glow of twilight memories and the haunting echo of missed chances, the answers remain as elusive as the shadows at dusk, inviting us to look again, to question again, and to immerse ourselves in the endless dance between what is seen and what is forever cloaked in mystery. In that endless twilight between certainty and doubt, the human spirit finds solace and meaning in the endless possibilities, a narrative that continues to evolve, much like the life of the Winter Soldier himself, scarred and redeemed by a past that refuses to be forgotten, and the legacy of the Parkers, whose absence speaks volumes, even when their names remain unspoken. And so, amid a turbulent flow of theories, counter-arguments, and alternative explanations, we embrace the truth that every life, every act of sacrifice, every covert operation, and every lost memory contributes to a larger hall of echoes. A hall where the stories of tragedy and resilience perpetually intertwine, creating a timeless ballet of destiny that captivates the hearts and minds of those daring enough to wonder what truly lies behind the veil of secrecy. All the while, in silent observance, the history of these lives whispers forward, a murmur of unfinished accounts and latent energy, urging us to continue the quest for meaning in a universe where every unanswered question invites a deeper, more passionate engagement with the past. And as we navigate this endless journey through hidden corridors and secret alliances, the layered narrative of the Winter Soldier and the vanished Parker family stands as an eternal reminder that even in the most meticulously constructed worlds of heroes and legends, the most profound stories are those tinged with mystery, loss, and the unyielding human drive for truth and redemption. It was during one of his many solitary nights perched atop a towering building, with the city murmuring below him, that Peter first encountered fragments of the impossible. Murmurs and rumors swirled around the secret history of the Winter Soldier, a man whose own troubled past had been interlaced with wars, betrayals, remarkable feats of survival, and a dark, haunting void of remorse. For years, the Winter Soldier had been a specter on the side of justice and retribution, a man without a conventional history, driven by forces that transcended the ordinary. But deeper than the tragedy of his own lost identity lay an even more staggering revelation. Bucky Barnes, who had been both a soldier and a savior, may have played a role in the ultimate betrayal, being responsible for the demise of Peter's parents. This discovery did not immediately crash into Peter like a tidal wave, but slowly emerged from the recesses of hidden records and clandestine meetings held in the back alleys of espionage. The realization struck Peter in fragments. A skirt of a VIN here, a tattered diary entry there, each piece a minuscule clue that began to paint an alternate narrative of his tragic past. In whispered conversations in dimly lit rooms, a conspiratorial network of informants, many with eyes as tired as Peter's own, began to speak of assassinations that were too carefully orchestrated to be deemed accidents or the violent aftermath of a robbery gone wrong. They spoke of an operative whose hands, once stained by the blood of countless enemies on far-off battlefields, had now been irrevocably associated with a betrayal too personal to ignore. It was as if every shadow in the city, every half-whispered secret, was orchestrating a complex symphony that culminated in the revelation that Bucky Barnes, the man who had once been a friend to his father, whose involvement in covert operations had always been shrouded in mystery, was connected to the death of the very figures who had hoped and dreamed of a better future for him. As Peter delved deeper into the labyrinth of his own origins, the tapestry of his past and present began to intertwine in ways that were as mesmerizing as they were tragic. In the quiet solitude of his apartment, amid scattered scientific journals and faded photographs, Peter would pore over these newfound details. Nights bled into days, as he followed every fragment of evidence, piecing together the storyline by painstaking line. The ink on the original documents, yellowed by time and endless neglect, told tales of covert meetings and desperate deals. A single handwritten note, its corners brittle as if embodying the weight of history, hinted at a pact forged in desperation during one of history's most tumultuous eras. It spoke of betrayal, sacrifice, and a misguided attempt to protect something far greater than individual drama. Peter's heart pounded in his chest as he realized that he was not merely an orphan of fate, but a living repository of interwoven destinies, a nexus point where the forces of history met the currents of personal vendetta and unresolved sorrow. In the quiet nights when the city's heartbeat slowed to a muted rhythm, Peter's inner turmoil grew louder. The man he once considered a distant memory, the father who had sacrificed himself in the line of duty, his mother whose gentle smile once lit the darkest corners of the world, acquired a new layer of complexity. Their untimely departures were no longer random tragedies but pivotal points in a conspiracy that had remained hidden for years. His thoughts turned over and over like a ceaseless tide, questioning every parallel moment of his life that suddenly acquired a hue of betrayal. How was it that the man known as the Winter Soldier, who had himself been shaped by swords of war and the scars of regret, could end up being the architect of such a profound personal loss? It was as if fate, in a dark twist of irony, had chosen two souls, each marred by their choices and mistakes, to bear the brunt of cosmic justice. Yet amid the swirling chaos of his newfound understanding, Peter also recognized the potential for growth. The discovery of Bucky Barnes as the orchestrator of this heinous act was destined to leave deep wounds in his soul. However, sometimes it is these very wounds that teach a man about the duality of heroism and the bitter lessons of forgiveness. For every blade of sorrow, there lies a possibility of redemption, a chance to rebuild oneself stronger, like a mosaic pieced together from shards of broken dreams. Peter pondered on the idea that perhaps, in learning of his parents' fall, he could not only harness his own pain but also forge an identity that transcended vengeance. With each bitter revelation, his inner dialogue constantly oscillated between the desire to seek revenge and the need to find a way to mend the deep divides tearing his heart apart. As Peter's journey into the hidden corridors of his past deepened, so too did the possibility of an entirely unanticipated future, a delicate tapestry woven with threads of retribution, reconciliation, and the unyielding quest for justice. Within the echoing halls of his thoughts, a scenario began to form like an imperceptible mist, a confrontation with Bucky Barnes. This imagined encounter was not merely a battle of fists or wits, but a meeting of souls burdened by their own histories. Peter often dreamed of facing the Winter Soldier face to face, of standing before the man whose hand had indirectly sculpted his tortured destiny. In these daydreams, the city faded into oblivion, leaving only two figures suspended in a moment beyond time. The silence between them was thick with unspoken truths, as if the very air was waiting to see which path would be chosen. Was it the path of retribution, where the scales of justice would tip irrevocably into the domain of bloodshed? Or was it the path of forgiveness, where even the deepest wounds could someday heal? It was in the hazy realms of midnight musings that Peter would imagine Bucky's tired eyes, haunted by memories of battles fought and sacrifices made, reflecting back at him in a look that was both pleading and resigned. In that imagined confrontation, there would be no simple resolution. Instead, a complicated dance of emotions would ensue, a poignant exploration of vengeance, empathy, and a desperate search for understanding. Peter's heart ached with the duality of his situation. The pull of anger, which demanded retribution for the loss of everything he held dear, and the equally powerful tug of compassion, which recognized that Bucky too was a victim of circumstances far beyond his control. In these imagined scenarios, the two men would cast aside the trappings of their former identities, grappling not just with the past, but with the essence of who they had become. It was this internal struggle that gave birth to the possibility of transformation. Could it be that through this singular confrontation, both adversaries might somehow come to terms with their shared scars and forge a future built upon understanding rather than endless retaliation? The repercussions of this revelation, however, were not confined solely to Peter's internal battles. In the larger scheme of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the integration of such a storyline would ripple outwards, disrupting established alliances and opening the door to unforeseen conflicts or unexpected collaborations. The MCU, with its intricately woven tapestry of heroes and villains, had always thrived on the element of surprise, on the way that seemingly disparate characters could find their destinies intertwined in the midst of grand cosmic struggles. The web that connected each hero and villain alike was as fragile as it was resilient, and the potential revelation of Bucky Barnes' involvement in the death of Peter's parents threatened to tear that web apart. Imagine then, the cascading effects of such an integration. Every alliance, every shared moment of vulnerability between the heroes might now be reframed under the harsh light of betrayal. Friends could become foes in an instant, and old wounds could be reopened with devastating intensity. The implications for the overarching narrative were staggering. For years, the MCU had carefully balanced personal vendettas with universal stakes, using personal tragedies as a stepping stone to defend larger ideals. Yet, in this new retelling, a deeply personal tragedy would serve as a fulcrum, tilting the scales of destiny and redefining heroism for an entire universe. In this alternate reality, a meeting between Spider-Man and the Winter Soldier would not simply be an exchange of words. They would become a microcosm for the struggles that had defined the MCU from its very inception. Their confrontation would be a blend of raw emotion and strategic posturing, a dramatic interplay where every word, every gesture was steeped in the weight of untold histories. It might begin with Peter tracking down Bucky based on a series of clandestine clues left behind by shadowy figures. Clues that whispered of past sins and half-truths long buried under the debris of time. The pursuit would lead both of them through twisting alleyways and the secret underbelly of a city that had seen too many tragedies to count. Each step would be a testament to the double-edged nature of heroism, where the desire to right wrongs must sometimes confront the harsh reality that the past is never fully atoned for, no matter how many battles are fought in its name. As the two finally came face to face, the air between them would be charged with an intense energy, a swirling vortex of anger, guilt, sorrow, and an inkling of hope. Peter, with the combined force of his personal loss and the resilience of a young man hardened by adversity, would demand answers for the agony that had shaped his life. Bucky, whose own life had been marred by manipulation, bloodshed, and the unyielding burden of regret, would be forced to confront the undeniable fact that his actions had consequences far beyond the battlefield. Their conversation would stretch into the early hours of dawn, a harrowing yet cathartic exploration of duty versus desire, justice versus vengeance. Words would flow like a tumultuous river, eroding the barriers between enemy and friend until, for a brief moment, both men glimpsed the possibility of absolution in each other's eyes. In the aftermath of their confrontation, no party would emerge entirely unscathed. Peter's character, already molded by hardship and honed by relentless pursuit of justice, would be irrevocably changed by this meeting. The revelation that his parents' death was inextricably linked to the hands of a man who might once have been considered an ally or even a friend resounded deeply within him. Every heroic feat he had accomplished up to this point, every decision tinted with the moral complexities of life in a world filled with both light and darkness, now took on an added layer of bittersweet irony. The burden of lost innocence, compounded with the realization of betrayal, would force him to navigate uncharted territory, where his innate sense of right and wrong was constantly challenged by painful, unexpected truths. Each swing from building to building, each snapshot captured of a city teeming with life, would now be a silent prayer for redemption, a plea that even if the past could not be altered, the future might yet offer a path toward healing. Meanwhile, in the halls of power and in the silent boardrooms where decisions affecting the fate of the MCU were being made, whispers started to circulate. The integration of such a deeply personal storyline could not help but ripple outwards, affecting not only the dynamic between Peter Parker and Bucky Barnes, but also the relationships among a myriad of heroes who had long been allies in a fragile coalition against the forces of chaos. The revelation had the potential to drive a wedge into the unity that had been painstakingly built over decades. A unity held together by common purpose, yet vulnerable to the fissures created by personal vendettas and betrayals. There were those who would see this new revelation as an opportunity for drastic change, a chance to realign allegiances, to step away from rigid responsibilities and embrace a more nuanced view of justice, where redemption was as much a goal as the elimination of a common enemy. In hushed conversations between seasoned strategists and battle-hardened veterans of conflicts past, visions of a future replete with new alliances and unexpected partnerships began to take shape. Leaders who had once believed in the absolute dichotomy of good versus evil were now confronted with an intricate mosaic of motivations, where each hero's past counted for something in the overall tapestry of their universe. It was conceivable that figures older and wiser might propose a temporary truce, a merging of forces to explore the possibility of healing this festering wound of betrayal. In this reimagined narrative, even villains might find themselves caught up in a whirlwind of circumstances that forced them to re-examine their own legacies of darkness. For instance, Characters who had long lurked in the shadows and fed off chaos might suddenly find their own missions upended. A complex interplay of anger and regret that bound them to the fate of heroes like Peter and Bucky. On an even grander scale, this storyline could serve as the catalyst for new, unforeseen conflicts. A war of emotions and honor spanning the multiverse itself. Heroes whose stories had once been seen in isolation would now be rendered as chapters in a larger epic. Their destinies intertwined by a common thread of loss and the relentless pursuit of atonement. The very notion of a shared universe, so carefully curated over years of cinematic storytelling, would be transformed by the injection of a deeply personal drama. The delicate balance that allowed for crossovers between light and dark, the interplay of individual heroics with universal battles, would be redefined. Characters from far-flung corners of the Marvel Universe, whether they had been entirely separate in purpose or loosely connected in meaning, would suddenly be called upon to examine their own views of justice. When faced with a shared enemy that was as much a remnant of their past as it was a harbinger of the future, there were moments when the imagined consequence of these events felt almost too surreal. A delicate tapestry woven from the threads of shared regret and the duality of human nature. In one fateful scenario, Peter, grappling with the unbearable weight of truth, reached out to an old friend whose pragmatic view of life always kept him grounded. This friend recounted tales of a time when even the smallest acts of kindness could bloom into monumental changes. Period when heroes were not measured by the battles they fought, but by the compassion they displayed in the face of overwhelming adversity. He spoke of a moment when, in the darkest hour of a seemingly insurmountable war, a simple act of mercy had united former enemies in a fleeting truce. For Peter, this was not merely a story, but a whispered promise that perhaps in his own journey, forgiveness could be more potent than vengeance. It was a notion that allowed him to envision a future where the pain of betrayal could transform into a wellspring of strength. A story where the scars of the past would serve not as a chain, but as a reminder of the resilience inherent in every soul. As discussions of this revelation infiltrated the inner sanctums of the MCU's leadership, debates ignited over the morality and logistics of integrating such a personal vendetta into an already complex tapestry of narratives. Some believe that the raw emotion of Peter's internal struggle could serve as a unifying force, a means to remind all of the humanity that lay beneath the superpowers in high-stakes battles. Others warned that the sensitive balance of causality and consequence might tip too far into the realm of melodrama, overshadowing the truths that had made the universe so compelling. Yet, it was this very tension between idealism and realism that concocted a scenario so intoxicatingly ambiguous that it resonated on every level within the vast expanse of interconnected storylines. One thing was certain: no matter how the scales of justice shifted, the legacy of Peter Parker was forever entwined with that of the Winter Soldier. In the midst of this grand narrative, time seemed to slow to a pace that allowed each moment to breathe, each breath a measured beat in the delicate symphony of fate. The quiet mornings after long nights of introspection became punctuated with deliberate pauses, as Peter tried to navigate between the pull of a dark destiny and the possibility of rising above it. In these times of reflection, he would sometimes trace the contours of a hidden scar, both on his skin and in his soul, as if mapping out the long-forgotten battles that had formed him into the hero he was destined to be. The memory of his parents, once a beacon of hope and love, now joined forces with the ghosts of his internal demons, urging him to find a balance between retribution and redemption. Every choice, every swing across the darkened skyline, was fraught with the complexity of having to decide whether the cycle of violence could ever finally be broken. In this meticulously crafted narrative, fate was a patient sculptor, chiseling away at the rough stone of destiny with deliberate care. The confrontation between Peter and Bucky, though imagined in countless sleepless nights, was slowly taking shape on the hidden stages of destiny. Every life, every fractured relationship, every unspoken apology and unresolved feud carried within it the potential for transformation. In the silent spaces between each heartbeat, a lesson resonated: that sometimes the greatest heroes are not those who rise unscathed from the battles they wage, but those who learn to forgive, and in doing so, rewrite the story of their own existence. It was in these delicate moments of vulnerability that the potential for growth shined most brilliantly. Peter's evolution from a desperate young man haunted by unanswered questions into a resilient, courageous hero was defined by his willingness to embrace the chaos of his past, not as a chain, but as a stepping stone towards a future where light could flourish amidst the darkness. The revelation that his parents' demise had been orchestrated by the hands of a man as conflicted as Bucky Barnes was a bitter pill, yet it was also the catalyst for a metamorphosis. With each step forward, Peter came to understand that true heroism was not defined solely by physical triumphs, but by the moral courage to face the consequences of one's own actions, to dance with the shadows of betrayal, and to emerge, if not unscathed, at least more whole than before. As the implications of this discovery rippled outward, it became evident that the domestic tragedy at the heart of Peter's life was inextricably linked to a larger cosmic drama. With the MCU watching, its heartbeat quickening with collective anticipation, every subsequent interaction between characters was laced with anticipation. Allies and foes alike found themselves cast in new roles, the boundaries between right and wrong becoming increasingly blurred. In whispered conversations over late-night coffee in cramped hallways of secret headquarters, strategists and sidekicks exchanged glances heavy with unspoken questions. They wondered how the revelation might alter the careful choreography of alliances that had kept the universe balanced, if only for a while, and whether the emerging chaos could paradoxically be harnessed for a greater collective good. One illustrative moment emerged as Peter attended a clandestine meeting of a coalition of heroes who had long stood shoulder to shoulder against the tide of villainy. In this overcrowded room, overshadowed by muted lamplight and marked by the scars of countless battles, the conversation turned to the murmurings that now gripped the community of vigilantes and public protectors alike. There was talk of destiny, of the inescapable gravity of fate, and of how every secret, no matter how deeply buried, has the potential to upend even the most carefully constructed worlds. In that moment, as voices rose in debates over the possibility of reconciliation versus retribution, Peter saw in their eyes a reflection of his own inner turmoil, a complex cocktail of fear, anger, and a hunger for a truth that might make sense of it all. At that fateful meeting, an elder hero recounted a story from decades past, a story of a hero who had once faced an enemy, whose betrayal had been so profound that the entire world trembled in its wake. It was a reminder that sometimes, the seeds of future unity were sown in the soil of painful reconciliation, when adversaries found the courage to forgive even the unforgivable. For Peter, that evening was a turning point, a moment of reckoning when the threads of his destiny began to realign, preparing him for the inevitable encounter with a man who had unknowingly defined his own journey. It was as if the story being recounted served as both a prophecy and a benediction, casting a flickering light onto the path ahead, a path that promised confrontation, but also the possibility of transformation. In the days and nights that followed, as Peter continued to grapple with the enormity of his discovery, he embarked on a quest to learn more about the man known as Bucky Barnes. His investigations led him to long-forgotten archival footage, hushed interviews with former confidantes, and whispered recollections from those who had once fought by the Winter Soldier's side. In one particularly evocative episode, Peter found himself in a deserted safe house, poring over stacks of old newspapers and secret memos. Amid the dusty pages of history, there emerged a narrative that reimagined Bucky not merely as an assassin or a relic of a painful past, but as a man caught between the relentless demands of duty and the elemental forces of survival. The documents told of a time when Bucky had been a hopeful young soldier, eager-eyed and full of dreams, whose sudden pivot into darkness was precipitated by circumstances beyond his control. The tragedy that had led him to become the Winter Soldier was, in its own way, a mirror to the tragedy that now haunted Peter, a convergence of fate where lost dreams yielded bitter truths. These recollections painted a picture rich with nuance and sorrow, a history in which love, loyalty, and the anguished specter of loss were in constant, restless conflict. It was in these unguarded moments, when the past bled into the present like an unwelcome reminder, that Peter began to see that the line between right and wrong was not as clear-cut as he once believed. Each revelation forced him to look twice at the stories he'd been told all his life, a narrative painted in stark contrasts where heroes stood on one side and villains on the other. Instead, he discovered a world awash in gray, where every choice, every betrayal had been made in the crucible of circumstance, and where the potential for forgiveness was as real as the possibility of retribution. Thus, as Peter stood on the precipice of his own destiny, the implications of this mythic truth began to resonate far beyond his personal journey. The revelation that Bucky Barnes had played a hand in his tragedy was not just a chapter in a single hero's saga, it was a tremor that threatened to reshape the universe. The newfound understanding initiated a chain reaction among the heroes, forcing each individual to assess their own long-held convictions about loyalty, justice, and the irretrievable nature of past mistakes. Even those who had once been content to operate within the rigid boundaries of their own destinies found themselves compelled to re-examine their roles in a universe where mistakes were not always black and white, but infinitely complicated by the choices made in the name of survival. At the heart of this transformation was the realization that every act, every decision, the smallest spark, or the most violent confrontation had the power to ignite change on a grand scale. In quiet conversations during the dead of night, after the immediate chaos of action had subsided, heroes began to share their personal reflections. They recounted moments of vulnerability, of times when the line between friend and foe had blurred in the midst of crisis. In these tender exchanges, Peter's revelation of the Winter Soldier's culpability served as a catalyst, sparking a collective introspection about the true nature of heroism. It was a wake-up call to a generation of heroes that intertwined fates and shared scars could, perhaps, pave the way for a future defined not by ancient grudges, but by the willingness to forge new alliances. Over time, as whispers turned into open debate and debates into decisive actions, the MCU began to evolve in ways that no one could have foreseen. Heroes redefined their commitments, sometimes setting aside old enmities in pursuit of a broader vision of unity, a vision where the healing of past wounds was seen as the first step towards a safer, more compassionate world. Peter, now more determined than ever to find a balance between the pain of his loss and the promise of a better future, emerged as a de facto leader in this movement. His journey, imbued with both fire and sorrow, began to serve as a beacon for others, a reminder that even the deepest of betrayals could eventually give way to reconciliation and growth. In the final analysis, the intertwining destinies of Spider-Man and the Winter Soldier represented a microcosm of the enduring struggle between light and darkness, between hope and despair. Each meeting, each confrontation, was a tightly choreographed dance of fate, a dance where every step carried the echoes of history and the promise of tomorrow. It was a reminder that the past, no matter how painful or complex, was an inseparable part of the present, a foundation upon which the future in all its uncertain beauty must be built. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Peter's internal narrative transformed into an epic of resilience and reluctant empathy. Every whispered secret, every clandestine meeting in noisy backrooms and deserted archives, stitched together the fabric of his renewed resolve. The stark realization that Bucky Barnes was not a one-dimensional villain, but rather a man scarred by war and fated to make impossible choices, began to erode the barriers of unyielding anger. Instead, Peter started to sense the fragile tendrils of compassion seeping into his hardened heart, an acknowledgement that while vengeance might momentarily soothe the burning pain of betrayal, only forgiveness had the power to set the future free. And so, in a moment destined to be etched forever in the annals of superhero lore, the long-anticipated confrontation finally took shape. In a nondescript rooftop meeting, bathed in the soft luminescence of an awakening dawn, Peter and Bucky stood face to face. The air was heavy, the silence punctuated by the soft echoes of distant turbulence, a symphony of unresolved conflict and the possibility of redemption. Peter's eyes, brimming with the weight of his lost childhood and the hopes for a future remade, met Bucky's, which spoke of regret, longing for forgiveness, and the understanding that some sins, however deep, could be met with the courage to change. In quiet, measured tones, Peter began the dialogue, a dialogue that was as much with himself as it was with Bucky. He recounted the cherished memories of his parents, the voice of wisdom and warmth that had once fed his soul, and the devastating shock of discovering that these very memories had been irreversibly tainted by betrayal. Bucky, his countenance etched by years of guilt and the horrors witnessed on distant battlefields, listened intently as if each word was a requiem for what could never be undone. In that charged silence, the two men exchanged more than mere words. They exchanged a lifetime of experiences, a shared understanding of how the scars of the past could transform into the building blocks of a future wrought with hard-won lessons. The conversation meandered like a slow river, filled with passionate recollections and quiet apologies. They spoke of the cost of loyalty, of how the lines dividing right from wrong blurred in the grueling heat of war, and how every human being was, in some profound way, a victim of the circumstances that shaped them. Peter's yearning for justice was tempered by a dawning realization that revenge was a road with no end, a path that would only leave him as broken as the man responsible for so much sorrow. Bucky, in his measured regret, acknowledged the irrevocable choices that had led him to become the instrument of tragedy, urging Peter to see that even in darkness there could exist a path forward, a chance at absolution through understanding, rather than endless vendetta. As their heartfelt dialogue drew to a close amidst the gentle caress of a new day, mentor and protege, enemy and friend, glimpsed the tender possibility that perhaps redemption was not the privilege of a select few, but the birthright of every tortured soul. The city below, oblivious to the intimate drama unfolding above, continued its timeless rush towards the future, a subtle reminder that life in all its pain and glory pressed onward inexorably. In the chapters that followed, the reverberations of that fateful meeting echoed through every corner of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Long-standing alliances were tested, and rivalries softened as characters came to understand that the true enemy was not always found on the battlefield, but within the confines of one's own heart. Conversations that began in hushed tones in remote hideouts evolved into grand declarations on the silver screens, a renaissance of thought where every hero was compelled to look inward and ask, what is the true measure of justice? Is it revenge and retribution, or is it the courage to forgive? For Peter Parker, the journey that began with a shattering revelation had come full circle. The pain of learning that Bucky Barnes had been behind his parents' demise was immense. Yet it was this very pain that steeled his resolve to shape a future free from the chains of a bitter past. His evolution into the hero known as Spider-Man was no longer solely about fighting external villains, but about battling the inner demons that threatened to erode his spirit. And as each new challenge emerged, a challenge paled in comparison to the multifaceted confrontations of memory and destiny. Peter discovered that while the burden of legacy was heavy, it also bore the seeds of profound transformation. The sprawling narrative that encompassed the fall, rise, and ultimate reconciliation of these two troubled souls was a saga rich with possibility. It was a story that delved into the essence of what it meant to be human, a tale of pain, forgiveness, transformation, and above all, hope. In every whispered secret in the corridors of power, every shared moment of vulnerability between comrades and adversaries alike, there lay the underlying truth that the stories we carry inside us, even those born of the deepest betrays, have the power to redefine destiny. And so, in the lingering twilight of that transformative night, the echoes of an impossible truth continued to reverberate throughout the universe. The implications for Peter Parker were profound. The revelation had forced him to confront not only the demons of his own past, but also the nature of heroism itself. A heroism not defined by the simple dichotomy of light versus dark, but by the relentless quest to embrace complexity, to reconcile the past with the promise of tomorrow. It was a legacy that would shape him, guide him, and ultimately transform every step he took along the precarious tightrope between justice and mercy. In the grand tapestry of interconnected lives and interwoven destinies, the saga of the Winter Soldier and Spider-Man served as a delicate reminder that every betrayal, every moment of cruelty against the fabric of family and honor, was also a call to rise above the limited narrative of revenge. It was an invitation to forge bonds even in the most unlikely of circumstances, to let the turbulent waters of regret mix with the clear streams of redemption, and to discover that even in the midst of heart-wrenching loss, there existed the quiet promise of healing. Thus, as the MCU turned its gaze inward to the intimate dramas of its heroes, the narrative possibilities blossomed like fragile wildflowers in a field scarred by ancient battles. The potential dynamics between Spider-Man and the Winter Soldier were not to be confined to titanic clashes of muscle and might, but comprised a shifting mosaic of mutual discovery. Every meeting, every anguished conversation, and every moment of shared despair gradually knitted a firm foundation for a future wherein the boundaries of enmity and compassion were forever redefined. In this vast universe, overflowing with untold stories, one timeless truth emerged: that the journey towards finding inner balance is paved with the lessons of the past, and that even the most harrowing betrayals can sow the seeds for a new beginning. In the days that followed that critical confrontation, Peter embarked on a quiet campaign to reconcile the disparate elements of his shattered past. With each challenge he faced, each villain subdued, each ally reached out to, and every regret confronted, the legacy of his parents resurged as a beacon of both personal loss and undying resilience. Deep within him, the dialogue between vengeance and forgiveness continued to play out day by day, each internal debate echoing the eternal struggle between the public persona of Spider-Man and the private intensities of Peter Parker. In time, those moments of quiet introspection began to bear fruit, as Peter's path transformed into one of not just survival but also redemption, a testament to the enduring human spirit. Even beyond the individual transformation of Spider-Man, the broader effects on the Marvel Cinematic Universe were profound and far-reaching. The ripple of this intricate narrative spread outward to touch the lives of other prominent heroes, and even covert figures who had long operated in the shadows. Closed-door meetings in fortified command centers grew charged with new urgency. Each hero, from the stalwart figures of old to the rising stars of tomorrow, found themselves compelled to re-examine the intricacies of their own decisions and relationships. In many ways, the unfolding truth about Peter's parents, stemming from an almost unimaginable act of betrayal by Bucky Barnes, became a wake-up call to an entire universe that the sins of the past must be acknowledged if a brighter future was to take root. In this reimagined universe, alliances shifted as old friends revisited their values, and once rigid boundaries softened in the warm glow of collective understanding. The discovery that a revered figure in the annals of their shared history had contributed to such personal tragedy did not lead solely to a cycle of retribution. Instead, it opened the door for an emblematic moment of communion among those who had long fought together against overwhelming odds. Conversations sparked new initiatives aimed at healing not just physical wounds inflicted in battle, but the deeper, more complex emotional scars that could isolate even the mightiest warrior. Heroes who had once been fixated solely on the immediate tasks at hand began to ponder the enduring legacy of their actions, striving to find a unifying narrative that brought hope rather than despair to a fractured world. And so, in this intricate ballet of destiny and resolve, every heartbeat, every shared glance between Spider-Man and the Winter Soldier resonated with the promise of change. Their intertwined fates offered a perspective on heroism that went far beyond the spectacle of combat, inviting everyone to believe that even in the wake of tragedy there exists the potential for renewal. In the quiet folds of the MCU's unfolding saga, where every secret and every revelation contributed to the rich tapestry of interconnected lives, this narrative stood as a testament to the transformative power of confronting uncomfortable truths, a transformation propelled not solely by the desire for revenge, but also by the relentless pursuit of redemption. As the days stretched on and bright tomorrows gradually replaced the dimming pages of the past, Peter Parker's journey, marked by sorrow, confrontation, and eventual understanding, became an enduring legend in its own right. It was a narrative filled with moments of exquisite tension and tender reflection, where the promise of forgiveness lay as palpable as the echo of every hard-fought battle. And in this grand, ever-evolving saga, the once insurmountable barriers between estrangement and reconciliation dissolved, leaving behind a legacy of hope that would inspire countless generations of heroes to come. Thus, the story of a once dismissed secret, a secret that intertwined the fates of Spider-Man and the Winter Soldier, slowly emerged as an epic tale of complexity, resilience, and the transformative power of remembrance and forgiveness. Even as the Marvel Cinematic Universe continued to expand, embracing new challenges and new heroes, the quiet lessons learned from one deeply personal confrontation echoed in every corner of that universe. It was a reminder that every hero, regardless of how fractured or confused their past might be, carried within them the seed of greatness, an enduring capacity to forge light from the darkest remnants of betrayal and sorrow. In the end, the narrative of betrayal, revelation, and eventual understanding became more than just the story of a single tragic event. It evolved into a living myth, a myth that reminded all who heard it that the path to redemption was paved not with the cold steel of vengeance, but with the gentle, steady courage to forgive, to change, and to reimagine a future imbued with the quiet promise that every broken heart could one day find its way back to light. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Also, what do you think about Winter Soldier possibly having been the one to have killed Peter Parker's parents?